Yo, what's up? We're back with Tristan Haggard here. We're covering Child of God tonight by Cormac McCarthy. Last week we covered Outer Dark. This one is particularly dark. We're covering a sort of dark novel. See, I would say that we're covering a series of dark novels by Cormac McCarthy, but they're sort of all like that. But this one is particularly dark, and it really is. I mean, Cormac McCarthy has done serial killer works before with look at No Country for All Men. I mean, he's a serial killer. Anton Chigurh call it is working for the cartels, etc. But this one's quite different because we have a guy named Lester Ballard who is a kind of neo-Cain wandering the outer zone, just wreaking havoc through Appalachistan. So, Tristan, how do you want to take us into this novel? Into Child of God here.
First of all, yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I'm glad. I think when you and I were reading Outer Dark, and I told you if you like Outer, because you were telling me how much you loved Outer Dark. I was like, well, if you really like this, you got to read Child of God. This was the second McCarthy novel that I got my hands on. The first one was The Road. That was recommended to me by a buddy of mine. So I read The Road and I loved it. Just completely crushed me. I don't remember a book before The Road that I read that just made me weep. Like I never read a book before that like made me cry like that. Like The Road had me just bawling at the end of it, the last few pages, and I still can't read it without weeping like a baby at the end. It's such a, his prose is so beautiful there. I found it. I don't know, people say that The Road is bleak, right? But I think I found The Road to be very like an uplifting novel. I don't mind the darkness. I don't mind, the darker subject matter in novels. I think it's important. So like some of my favorite authors are like Dostoevsky, McCarthy. So I enjoy that. I enjoy that vibe. So anyways, I'd read The Road and I wanted to get my hands on something else that he had written. And so at the library at my university, it was like 2007 or something, and I'm looking through the titles of his book. Like back then, we had this. There was a program. We had like this proprietary computer program in the UC library there, and so you go and you look up the author and see what books they have from the author. So I remember it was Blood Meridian, and I'm like, okay, what is this? And, it's a Western called Blood Meridian. This is like some gay cowboy vampire nonsense. I'm like, I'm not reading that. That sounds stupid and campy. And then I think probably saw All the Pretty Horses too, and I was just like, that's the stupidest name for a book I've ever heard. I'm never gonna read that gay book. So that's like, oh, Child of God, like that sounds intense. What is this? And so yeah, I got the it was probably like a first edition or something too, because it was it was UC Santa Cruz, so I had this nice hardcover copy of Child of God that I checked out. I had no idea what I was in for getting into the novel, and I loved it. So when I read Child of God, I never read a book that was anything like that. It was completely different from The Road, but still his same somewhat minimalist prose style. And yeah, I was kind of floored by it. It was a book I never recommended anybody read. I never recommended any of my friends. Usually if I like a book, it's like, all right, I'll recommend this to all my friends for the next month because I can't stop thinking about it, right? But with Child of God, it was like, there's no way how could I recommend this book? It's so dark, it's so grotesque.
Yeah.
And it's I couldn't do it. So yeah, after that, I didn't read any McCarthy till I picked up Blood Meridian a couple years ago. It took me a while to get through that. I had a few failed attempts. I loved it. I just kept getting distracted with other readings and had to start it over and over again. So yeah, the Child of God definitely, it is kind of one of my favorite novels just because of when I read it, the time that I read it. It kind of blew my mind that something like this existed. Right. So it's written in this way. It's third person narration through most of the novel, but it actually zooms in and does this cool kind of switch into somewhat second person narration. And you and I were talking about that narrative shift where he'll suddenly address the audience and he'll say, well, like, the first page of the book, it gives this description of Lester Ballard. There's the usurers are coming to his land and they're going to auction off his home, his ancestral land that was his dad's. And to watch these things issuing from the otherwise mute pastoral mornings, a man at the barn door. He's small, unclean, unshaven. He moves through the dry in the dry chaff among the dust and slats of sunlight with a constrained truculence, Saxon and Celtic bloods, a child of God, much like yourself, perhaps. So it's yeah, I mean that line right there kind of sums up the whole the vibe of the whole novel, as well as a really important thing that Cormac is doing here in the way that he narrates it, because it's a relatively simple story. It's nothing complex. There's no crazy shifts of timeline. It's not like this insane postmodern style. It's written in like I'd say like a Hemingway Faulknerian style, little bits of Melville in there with some of the prose descriptions of the landscape that I love, which is completely emblematic and of McCarthy. But the narration style is something that I just keep thinking about as I read it. And upon second reading, it's not even there are parts of it that are disturbing still, right? There are parts of this book that are incredibly disturbing, including the scenes. I think the most disturbing scene is the strange sexuality that's described. It's very grotesque. It's very animalistic. And through what's his name, the guy that runs the dump, him and his family. So, but what I find is I'm mostly just looking at the style, the way he punctuates, the way that he breaks up ideas in paragraphs, and the way that he addresses the audience. Especially he does these short chapters, so it's a very easy read. Like I read half of this book today, just like in between other tasks that I was doing, just kind of flipping through it. But he'll address the audience directly, often in these short chapters, which are essentially like barroom conversation. It's like you're sitting in a bar talking to the townsfolk, and they're just telling stories, but they're addressing you as the reader as if you're there with them. So it'll zoom in, and some guy will tell you a story about, oh, well, Lester was never the same after he got whacked with that axe. His head didn't sit right on his shoulders after that. And it'll launch into these quick chapters of anecdotes that give you a little bit of a history of Lester, give you a little bit of insight into what it's like to live in Sevier County, Tennessee, where this takes place. And that's one of the things I love about this novel, is just that simple, straightforward, but also somewhat lively, and it feels innovative, the style, right? It feels journalistic while also feeling allegorical. So it's got this kind of allegorical, outside of time feeling, but then it also feels journalistic, as if you're investigating this thing through having conversations over a beer, or conversations at the general store, or talking to your neighbors on the porch. That's kind of the vibe that you get from it. But a campfire story.
Yeah, that's a really good observations. I think that I first of all, I'm twitching because I'm in this new chair right here. I don't know if you can hear this thing creaking. I'm trying not to let this thing creak. I hope you can't hear the seat creaking when I'm sitting here.
I can't hear it. You got that good mic. You can't hear anything.
I finally got an actual chair to sit in. I've been sitting on like a stool for the past 4 years, like this. Like, it's got a little pillow on top, but it's a stool because it was at the perfect height. Anyway, whatever. Yeah. So I first discovered McCarthy when I was in AP English class in the 90s. And I remember that Harold Bloom had just written, he'd published The Invention of the Human. And I came across the Western canon. And in the Western canon, he talks about Cormac McCarthy, and we were reading passages of it. But I didn't really pay attention to Cormac McCarthy. All I paid attention to was there were some sort of ancillary comparisons with Fraser's Cold Mountain. I covered Cold Mountain a while back in an American Gothic, a Southern Gothic stream. But then of course No Country for Old Men came out in 2007 and won Best Picture, and Cormac McCarthy's name was sort of all over that. And by that point, he had really been reintroduced into the sort of literary zeitgeist that like made its way into a kind of common pop culture. And so when I read No Country for Old Men, I was really blown away by the fact that, first of all, you rarely read a novel that is written in a cinematic style that is not totally cut up and remade for a film. Usually the person who buys the rights for the film completely changes the way that the novel works because it has to work for a screenplay. But that wasn't the case for No Country for Old Men. It was written with that sort of in mind, we follow these characters in the present tense, even though it's set in the past, we're in the present tense, and we follow Anton Chigurh through this like visceral Western. It's like a neo-Western landscape where he is really some sort of agent of fatalistic darkness, and that sort of on the surface in the book. But then I read Blood Meridian, and I read Blood Meridian again, and I was struck by, I mean, I reference Harold Bloom a lot because I think that he's sort of my go-to for literary criticism in terms of the way that he it conveys or expresses and understands and then conveys a sense
Yeah,
of,
no, I like Harold Bloom. I think, I mean, I have to agree with him on every analysis. And
well, you were
you probably
talking
don't.
about before about, you disagree, especially with parts of his assessment of Cormac McCarthy as part of this sort of American Gnostic system, and that's an interesting.
I think it's overplayed. I think Bloom's part of that American Gnostic worldview, and I think that I think we tend to see the things how we are rather than how they really are sometimes. Except me, I see everything perfectly objectively. Right?
It is interesting. It is interesting because Harold Bloom is talking about. He's talking about he's an analytical writer who's talking about the creative writers, but he's really the architect of this sort of American what he calls, again, the American religion, which is like sort of Gnosticism mixed with Pentecostalism. I mean, he gets.
I think he's kind of right about that. I just don't think I feel like Cormac is. I see a lot of when I read McCarthy, I see a lot of his childhood experiences as like an altar server peeking in there. I see him. I read him as a Roman Catholic struggling with his faith his whole life. I think Cormac even sees. I think Cormac is because he grew up in Appalachia. Well, I mean, he grew up in Knoxville, and then he lived. I think they're from Maine, right? Like the family's from like Maine or something.
Yeah, he's from Rhode Island.
So I think he was struggling with the American Calvinist ideas as well, but I don't think he ever bought into Calvinism. Like that's why all the villains of his book are basically, determinist Calvinists, like that think that their actions are the very word of God, basically. And those are the villains, right? And the so I don't know. I don't want to get too much into broad sweeping statements about his whole lexicon, but.
Well, I think that McCarthy does something interesting, which is with his works, is that even though they are they're all sort of in the same universe. This sort of what they call world building. When you talk about various fantasy authors. I mean, but they are all completely unique, and they have a kind of singular voice throughout all the work. You can tell that Cormac McCarthy wrote all the books, but there is something, I think, which matches a kind of Shakespearean largeness for his work, which is this like sort of invention of the human. Now he deals with a different sort of humanity than Shakespeare deals with, even though Shakespeare is a kind of all encompassing, and there are elements of that even in this, but he deals. To me, like the opening of the book was really perfect because in the paragraph where he talks about Saxon and Celtic bloods, there's something that he does where I always get the sense, and especially in this, that I feel like I'm in this world, but I'm in another world. I'm in a highly energized and potent spirit world that is a version of this world where these characters are wandering. And this really is a kind of Cain character wandering around without grace, without just kind of not even lost, but sort of existing on pure spite and will. And it's weird because
but you catch that. I mean, there's a lot of Gollum in Lester Ballard as well. Like Lester Ballard is kind of like an adult Gollum character. It's it's Gollum. So he's an American Gollum.
There's a lot of that, and there's also a lot of the Icelandic saga. I mentioned the Icelandic sagas last time in Outer Dark, but there's even more.
Would you say that the Icelandic sagas influenced Gollum's caricature?
Yeah, absolutely,
quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
Because this is it's something I'm fascinated with. I heard you talking about this in your other stream, and I don't know anything about that. Could you expand on that, like the Icelandic sagas and how that ties in here?
Well, the Icelandic sagas are interesting. I took this. I was taking a class on Beowulf at Queen's. I went to Queen's University of Belfast, and I had this world-renowned expert on Beowulf, and then my next class and on Anglo-Saxon literature, and then the next class following that was this other guy named Ivan Herbison, I think it was. Anyway, this guy was an expert on the Icelandic sagas, and it was a whole class on the Icelandic saga as fiction and as literature. And what was really amazing about these things, because I didn't know anything going into them, it totally got me hooked, is that there's a series of Icelandic sagas. This saga means essentially to say. It's a saying. It's kind of a form of proto novel, and these existed starting around the year 1000 was a big time for literature. And of course we get the prose Edda, and we get various Germanic forms of literature. It's a early form of English literature. Icelandic and Icelandic is a Germanic language that sort of became much more singular in terms of Iceland, and then the Germanic Anglo-Saxon morphed into Middle English and then Modern English. But in the Icelandic sagas, the most there are a few of them. There's the Laxdæla saga. There's the Vinland saga, which is interesting because it deals with the discovery of America, and it was that right there alone is it's a fictional proof, but it's a fictional proof of the discovery of America by these Vikings, and it's a very short book. And then the most interesting one is a book called Egil's Saga, and Egil is this troll, sort of like gigantic troll character who's a man, but he has a number of qualities that set him apart from everyone else. And it's basically a novel. It's written in prose, which makes it different from everything else written at the time. The first novel in English was like Tom Jones or something, Henry Fielding. And Daniel Defoe. It was like 700 years later. We had a novel with Cervantes with Don Quixote, but that was contemporary with Shakespeare. These are like 600 years before that. So we have these prose accounts of basically a scop or a shop or a skald, which is like a poet who is talking about a character named Egil, and he's an ugly, big, like troll-like character who has a family, and he starts off in the saga in a blood feud. And basically in the system of, this is why it applies to Child of God, because in the system of blood feuds in Iceland, if a person took your property or took your cows and you didn't seek out vengeance against them, then basically the law was, well, you deserve it. You have to give it up because you didn't do anything about it. And then Egil sort of becomes an agent of this and then becomes a lawgiver himself. And then, so he functions as a number of different things. He's a poet. He's a kind of sorcerer, magician, because he can read runes, and he's a lawgiver. And all three of those things deal with language. He's also a berserker. So when he gets in fights, he like goes into this other world and becomes this lethal character, but he's likable. And the weird thing is that,
I mean, it's funny. So would you say Lester's like this inversion of this character or something? Because I mean, he's skillless. His only skill is he's great with a rifle, right? Yeah. He's vocationless. He's a wanderer. He's kind of seems relatively physically weak. I mean, he gets kicked in the head by a woman at one point in the book. Gets kicked multiple times by a woman. So yeah, he's also like there's nothing impressive about Lester Ballard except he's a good shot, right? But it's not this supernatural level of being a good shot. He's just he can hit a tight target.
No, I don't think it's an inversion. I think this is the kind of story that Egil would tell. So this is a character that, like, I can imagine the character of Egil in the saga recounting as one of the chapters in the saga this story, and because it reminds me of the Vinland saga, because it's like the Vikings got to America and they all sort of died off, or they proliferated on their own. Maybe one went to Minnesota and carved runes into a stone or whatever that is. And maybe one went somewhere else. But then there's this one guy who somehow existed and goes all the way down into Tennessee, and he's living. And then we have time passing, and we have some sort of spawn of this character, and this is that guy. Because, like you said, he's like a Gollum character. He's also exactly like Grendel is in Beowulf.
That's what I say. Yeah. So, and of course, Beowulf was really influential with Tolkien as well. I mean, Tolkien translated Beowulf, like one of the better translations.
He made Beowulf popular. That's the reason we study Beowulf at school, is because of Tolkien. It was sort of a forgotten work for a long time, and he took a lot of the language from Beowulf and sort of the poetic sentiments and the kennings from that, and incorporated that into Lord of the Rings. And this book, even though it is written it's an early McCarthy work, and it's a pretty easy book to read, and it's pretty straightforward. The language in it is almost completely Germanic to me. When I read this, it is full of tactile language. It's full of sort of a hard onomatopoetic language where we reduce the distance between the observation and the thing. It's almost like the word that he puts down is the very thing that we are seeing in the book. And it's really crazy, because when I read this, it took me a little while to get into it. I was like, I don't know, this couldn't possibly be as good as Outer Dark. I kept reading it, and then I got
it's very different prose style, right? And this coming after Outer Dark, and the prose style on this being way more stripped down, much more distilled. Outer Dark having these, beautiful, a lot more of this classic McCarthy beauty to it, but there's still this simplistic beauty to the writing here. Like it is. All right, this is going to sound weird, but it's a completely grotesque book, but it's a very beautiful book.
It is.
Child of God is a very beautiful novel.
It is, which is very, very unusual. And I mean, I just opened up to a random page here on page 88. I wrote on the bottom of the page, "This is so evil and surreal. This is the Green River Killer." Because he does this, he is the Green River Killer. He does the exact same thing that the Green River Killer did. He stages bodies. It
seems like he did research over some of these serial killers, these famous serial killers.
I mean, this character is so vile and so evil, and yet somehow, because this is what Harold Bloom was talking about. Harold Bloom said that essentially that the book is an expression of what he called the American sublime, or the American going into the American grotesque. I would call it the American phantasmagorical. I mean, it goes beyond what Poe ever could have dreamed to write, because Poe is much more descriptive rather than getting at the thing. It's much more about the description of the thing. And this is like the thing itself. The guy, it's written, like you said, like in a Hemingwayan style, where it seems almost very journalistic. But the takeaway I get from this book is that I wondered why the speaker of the book takes us, and this is where I get the eagle thing, takes us from third person to second person directly speaking to the reader. And I got a sense that either this was almost like a Viking telling, a skald or a wanderer poet telling the story around the campfire to people, or the fire at the mead hall to people listening as a form of entertainment, or that it's a kind of form of a spiritual account of from above about what it's like for a person to wander around and think that they can live in a world without justice and without consequences, but they are seen. We see them doing these things. And that's where the second person comes in. I mentioned when we were talking before, it made me think of the movie Psycho, because in the film Psycho, for the folks at home, people will remember this. In the film Psycho, we get a sort of convoluted series of different characters. We don't know who we're following. The girl at the beginning ends up dead. Then we follow a different blonde girl. It's sort of confusing. Eventually we focus on Norman Bates, and he's got birds behind him, and he's sort of a bird of prey. But then eventually we see that that's not even really Norman. Norman is a DID form of this demon full of these different characters. And when we really see Norman in the movie, most people think that it's when we see him at the end, when he's in the insane asylum, or when he's held in the straitjacket and he's got the fly crawling on his face. But when we really see Norman is when the detective goes up the stairs in the movie, and we see from above the mother come out of the bedroom with the knife and stab him, and he falls down the stairs. That's when we really see Norman, because we're seeing a God's eye view. So we see him straight on from above. So we know that the walls are broken down, the doors are broken down, and now we're seeing essentially what he actually is and how he's been existing. And that's how I see this book, that this guy slinks and slurps around doing all these deeds, and he's hidden from people, and I don't even know if he cares about being hidden, but we see his character and who he really is exposed at the end of the novel, but we also see him in the second person when the speaker is talking directly to us.
Well, the novel also starts out, we see Lester Ballard literally exposed as well. I mean, the first description of Lester Ballard is him in this barn taking a leak, right? And it describes the pool of hummus and the frothy urine. It's like this really crazy description. One of the first descriptions you got is him taking a leak, and then you got another description within like 10 pages of him taking a dump in an outhouse and wiping himself with a stick. So it's like him being exposed, and the grotesqueness and the baseness of Lester Ballard is kind of all encompassing in his character, but he's not like Norman Bates, because Lester Ballard isn't a demon, right? Lester Ballard is a man. And this is what's really well done about the novel, is that Lester it almost seems cartoonish when you talk about it, but when you actually read the novel, you really are getting this. Some of the imagery is extreme, and he's always described as, he's spraddle-legged, and he's like, there's a line where
a goat-born jaw.
He's got a knot in his jaw, and he's like he's chewing on something, but he's got nothing in his mouth. They squatted like constipated gargoyles. It's like these real funny. It's actually a very somewhat humorous book. I'd say it's the funniest of all of Cormac's books, and I think Cormac does put humor in his novels. It's not a lot, but there's humor there. But I'd say The Child of God is his funniest, but also his darkest and most disturbing. But the narration that we get about Lester, you're not supposed to think he's irredeemable and horrible, but you don't expect redemption for Lester. From the very beginning, you're not expecting him to repent, but you do know that Lester could repent. Right, you're told in the beginning he's a child of God, much like yourself, perhaps, and that perhaps is real important there, right? It's like you're supposed that perhaps a lot hinges on that perhaps for the audience and for the general populace who are going to be looking at this novel, right? So it opens up this idea of, could I be like that? Could I become like that? And can I see this person as being human? You can see the actions that he does, where he becomes more and more bestial in this kind of reverse theosis, this demonosis. He becomes animal-like. He becomes like an ape. I mean, he's described as, his howls are described as sounding like an ape. I think there's description that curses that hailed up over the thunder of the water, carried to the mountain and back like echoes from the clefts of Bedlam. That's like classic Child of God. For the
he's
clefts
also
of
like
Bedlam.
the jerk. He's like in Nightmare Alley. Like, he becomes the circus jerk. He becomes
circus. It plays a big part in this narrative as well.
Yeah. He becomes so beastly that he's like, if he weren't doing what he's doing here, he'd be biting off the heads off chickens or something,
which does happen in the novel as well.
yeah.
But not Lester Ballard. That scene, we got to talk about that scene a little bit. I got this page pulled up. I really like the prose here when it goes into kind of this somewhat, it's this kind of almost journalistic second person perspective in some of these little chapters. And it's just one page, basically a one-page chapter. I don't know. They say he never was right after his daddy killed himself. They was just the one boy. The mother had run off, I don't know where to, nor who with. Me and Cecil Edwards were the ones cut him down. He come in the store and told it like you'd tell it was raining out. We went up there and walked in the barn, and I seen his feet hanging. We just cut him down, let him fall on the floor, just like cutting down meat. He stood there and watched, never said nothing. He was about 9 or 10 years old at the time. The old man's eyes was run out on stems like a crawfish, his tongue blacker than a chow dog's. I wished if a man wanted to hang himself, he'd do it with poison or something, so folks wouldn't have to see such a thing as that. So it's like the shortest glimpse that you get there, but that's a lot, right?
I love your Tennessee accent, by the way. That's great.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure I messed up a few words there, but yeah, it's, I mean, you read it and you have to read it in that Tennessee accent, right? Like it's actually written in that way. It says himself with two S's. You know, that's
it's in a vernacular style.
There you go.
He gets rid of what I like about this. Bloom says that McCarthy, especially in this book, writes in a pseudo biblical style, which he in a way he does. And one thing that that I love is that he totally eliminates all unnecessary punctuation marks and the things that we rely on to tell us where we are in the normal work. So
and it flows still. You don't get lost.
Yeah, you don't. You know exactly who he's talking about. And in a sense, this is because form follows function in the book. It's like if a person's telling you a story, they don't need to say, and then he said, and then he said. He just, he takes
I know. You get see, and then after you read McCarthy, you get annoyed when you see quotation marks.
That's right.
You're like, and then he said, all you need is one he said within like an entire conversation. Really, you don't need 10 he says. You can initiate with one character and then just back and forth, and then you can, you know, he does it perfectly.
You get annoyed with punctuation writing as well. It's
oh yeah, but then it's different. It's not easy to write like he wrote because you're so used to using punctuation in the way that you're used to.
Yeah, I marked a couple of places in the book where he switches into the second person, like you were just mentioning.
So someone in the chat says he Nick was it Nin says he spat. Oh. Yeah, that's Lester spat, and then the character will say something. You know who's speaking because he just spat.
Yeah. He also says best words in the best order. That's all you need. He's exactly right. That's Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So that is kind of American poetic prose language. The two seem to be, that seems like an oxymoron, but it's actually true in terms of what the American religion or the American religious prose tells us.
Do you mind if I something I know I'm going to forget this. You mentioning kind of like the meta aspect of the narrative here and the narrative style and what the position that puts the audience in. And we were talking about kind of the sort of campfire journalistic style where I use the word journalistic, but I think campfire is better. You know, it's like you're investigating an oral history. It's like you're investigating. It's a historical. The reader becomes a historical investigator trying to piece together what really happened through conversations with other people. So you don't get access to the internal thoughts very often, but he will zoom and give you the thoughts of the character through the prose in the third person limited, right? So you'll some of these passages where Lester's wandering through nature and it'll say, you know, he wondered at the stars and what they were made of and what he was or something like that. It was like this, we've got this real beautiful way of kind of portraying what's going on without you hearing his internal monologue. Because I think I don't like very much when authors try to give you the internal monologue of characters. It doesn't work often. And it can be hard to relate to because everybody has their own internal narrative style. And I do really appreciate Cormac's way of showing and not telling. And it leaves something, there's this apophatic aspect to it, an apophatic aspect to the exploration of the characters of you see their actions, you see what they're doing. You don't have access to their heart, but you can kind of glean that from apophatically from the novel. And I think The Crossing gives the best insight into what Cormac's, at least, I mean, the Crossing is 32 years later, or was it? 22 years later, we published The Crossing after Child of God. But those passages in The Crossing where he's talking about the corrido, right? And how and things divorced from their meaning are useless, right? And that really what we have are stories, and that if you divorce things from the story, those things don't have meaning. So he did the Crossings, I think, is a beautiful novel, and it's there's a lot there. There are a lot of theological arguments going on between characters, and I think his narrative style gets summed up in those in the prose in The Crossing, where he's discussing the corrido and the nature of the tale and oral history. So I think when he's writing, that's what he's trying to capture. He's less inclined to cut and dry historical text. And I think like with something like Blood Meridian, what you're looking at is kind of, it's historical metafiction, but it's done in a real tasteful way, where it's not trying to be exactly literal, but it's also not literal. If that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between Blood Meridian and this book. I mean, not only in terms of the locus and the time frame, but also in terms of the Blood Meridian seems like a cosmic novel, like that we have characters who are like much more archetypal. There's like archetypes and archons that exist in this sort of furnace of the desert in this book, where we have a wide cast of characters. We've got an odyssey of time and place, and we have something sort of almost cosmological going on with the hero and the villain. And in this book, even though it's expansive and he roams around and the landscape seems huge, it seems to be much more insular in a way. And I'm not sure how he exactly achieves that, but I do know that that when you were talking about Hemingway, one thing that Hemingway and journalistic writers are always and you can actually hear this from commentators on like Boomer News. A lot of them that are journalists that become commentators actually do have this as a skill, if they have a skill. And that skill is basically like they began as sports writers, and sports writers are great. Hunter S. Thompson did this.
I was going to say Thompson, yeah.
And what they did is they basically trained themselves to give a depiction of the event, the person, and the thing that they did. So we have X did Y. And that becomes something that is really important in terms of American literature, because literature, especially where Cormac McCarthy is writing, kind of much more before that, but the modern era is a reaction against the kind of the like tacking on of the Victorians of adding so much description. I mean, you can really see this in Poe, especially in American literature, that there is so much description. There's so much kind of frill that occurs. And I'm not knocking Poe, because I love Poe works. They're just different. But there's so much frill that occurs there are so many adjectives and adverbs and prepositional phrases and descriptive content that is an extra. It's tacked on to the essential thing that's happening, which is a person does a thing. And I think that in a way, the stripping down the language seems minimal, but in this, McCarthy does something that great writers do, and that, for instance, scripture does, which is that all of the description is tied in with the nouns and the verbs. We don't have to have long, compound, complex sentences or extra telling us what's happening, because the form is tied up in the function, and the words reflect the actions themselves, and that is something really, really difficult to achieve. But he just seems to bring us into another world, and also metaphysical.
Have you done Lolita? Have you done Nabokov's Lolita?
No,
because that's a really difficult book to even discuss.
Yeah,
I feel like it's almost completely different. Nabokov's different. Nabokov seems. I don't like Nabokov's worldview, but I don't think he's a pederasty apologist or something like that. Because I read Lolita in college, and it's an interesting. You've read it, right?
No, I couldn't read it.
Okay.
No,
I think like you would be you'd be one of the only friends I've got that I would recommend to read that book. No. I mean, maybe got a few other literary friends that I would recommend actually read Lolita. But what he does with the narrative there is he's there's an untrustworthy narrator, right? And that's Humbert. And Humbert is the villain of the book. But he also tries to stylize himself as the hero and the victim in the book. But it becomes obvious as you're reading it that this man is a monster. But he's a brilliant writer. The character, Humbert, who's dictating this novel, is a brilliant writer. And he gives this flowery language and description in his apologetics for his actions while he's dehumanizing this child and destroying her life. Right. But then you see peek through the novel at times, the actual actions of the little girl are that of a girl that's being broken and destroyed, right? But Nabokov, not Nabokov, Humbert, the narrator of the novel is talking about how this is this great love story. You know, that I'm this poetic genius, and I need to, you know, protect my love here. And it's a novel about dehumanization.
Yeah.
But also the narrator and how the narrator is a dangerous thing. So it's kind of this. It's kind of postmodern. It's kind of like I would say it's a critique of the modernist movement in a way, but then also a critique of what the modernist movement was critiquing while getting into this somewhat postmodern thing. I don't know what to make of Lolita. I mean, I read it 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But it made me think of what you were discussing there about that
Well,
divide.
I know that, you know, the description you just gave me, because I couldn't read it. I couldn't read it past the opening sentence, honestly. I got to the word.
That's how it's he's such a bombastic and obnoxious narrator. You know, what was it like lilting, lollying, Lolita? Yeah. It's just so over the top. You're like, what is this nonsense?
I got to. There's a couple things that I really can't read that that really are repugnant to me, and one of them is Lewis Carroll. I hate Lewis Carroll's work so much. I hate Dr. Seuss. I hate nonsensical. I hate like nonsense. Like I don't like nonsense. Nonsense language to me is kind of satanic. It scared me as a child.
That's what it seemed like. This is what I kind of took away from Lolita, is that's what it was showing. It was showing like, look at all this flowery language. It's really just this monster trying to justify.
Well, I knew he's a monster. I mean, look, I was supposed to read it in college, and I wouldn't read it, and the reason was because the very first line, the very first sentence of the novel told me everything. Because he says fire. When I got to the word fire and the word loins,
fire my loins. Yeah,
you know, exactly. I knew that this man was diseased, and he was spiritually diseased, and I just didn't want to. I couldn't. But
that's what it's about. It's a book written by a spiritual. Well, the narrator is a spiritually diseased narrator. I don't know about Nabokov in his personal. I've only read that book. I never read Pale Fire or whatever else he wrote. But I heard he was. He was. I don't think his family were aristocratic Russians, and they were not. They weren't Bolsheviks, but they were hyper liberals. They were basically the midwives to the Bolsheviks was his family, and then he came to America and kind of got out of Dodge. But yeah, I don't think he's necessarily good person at all.
I mean, look, and I've said this on the channel a lot of times for the folks at home, that there is a huge difference between the minute that the author puts pen to paper, we have a character. So it's not necessarily emblematic of the author's views, but it didn't concern me in that. I just couldn't. And also Ben makes a good point right there. Shel Silverstein is way worse than Seuss. I also didn't like Shel Silverstein. I hated Shel Silverstein.
Shel Silverstein's pictures are grotesque.
I don't like
Shel Silverstein's books are worse than Child of God. They're more creepy and wrong.
I don't like the pictures of him. I didn't like I didn't like cutting down the tree. I didn't like any of that shit, man. That always
Silverstein just always feels like
bothered
Silverstein. Kind of need you say, but it just always feels like feels like you're reading some creeper groomer guy.
Bothers me, bro.
I feel like Silverstein is more evil than Nabokov. I don't know if Nabokov's evil because, like, from Lolita, it's an annoying book and it's a difficult read. But I just remember getting through it and being like, "Oh man, this is something weird and different and meta." Which is also kind of, I don't know. There's this irony behind irony, which is just like, I don't know. It gets too much. But it is an interesting read in that way. So I guess if you read the first page, you've read the novel.
I was 7 years old, and I went home, and my mom said, "What did you read today?" And I said, "Mom, they tried to make me read what the globalists want me to read. This guy Shel Silverstein, I just know he was a constant party goer at the Playboy Mansion. I can tell reading it, and I don't even know anything about that. I want to go back to history, and I want to read Alexander the Great." But that is true. He was one of the party goers at that place. I did not like that. I didn't like learning that. I think I learned that from my friend Brad when I was in 7th grade. He was like, this book we're reading. This guy went to the Playboy Mansion. Isn't that cool? And I was like, that's not cool. That's not cool. Brad. The place is cool. but I don't like this guy going there. That's not cool. I was 7 anyway. So there is something Shakespearean about this, though, about what you were talking about with the unreliable narrator and the use of language to convey a sense of equivocation and lies, and that is like Richard III does this better than any other character. He's a character that exists. He's capering nimbly to the loot, and he's this humpback guy who is he's killing constantly throughout the play, but he has a sense of humor about it. Even the first thing that Richard III says in the play, where he says, "Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the son of York," is an equivocation. There's a double and triple meaning packed into it, because when you watch the play, the characters in the play think that he's saying, "Oh, it's an end to war," because he's saying it's now is the winter of our discontent, so it's over. But what he's really, I've always taken to mean is that now is the cold time of our discontent, but it's being made summer. So winter time is summer for us. So death is life. It's kind of an inversion.
And there's something that's so dangerous about those types of pieces too. If you do a whole piece of art where it's like, well, the whole thing is ironic, and it's written in a way where it's self-consciously ironic, and the fake narrator, the character that's narrating it, is also throwing irony out there, it does get dangerous. And that's why you got Epstein had a big copy of Lolita in his like villa. I don't know if it was in his Little St. James Island spot or if it was in his New York mansion, but he did have a first edition copy of Lolita there. Even though it's like supposedly it's an anti, Nabokov's claims that yes, it's written about a villain. It's about villainy. It's written by a villain, but it's like the people who were into that stuff still liked your novel.
You remember the book that was used, that was entered into evidence that got Bill Clinton caught and got him impeached with Monica Lewinsky? It was a first edition copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I'll celebrate myself and sing myself. And what I assume, you assume. For every atom that belongs to me is good belongs to you. I am the president. I contain multitudes. Right? That's a line in the book. He loved that one. But anyway, so I think an opposite to what we were just describing in terms of irony layered upon irony is, for the folks at home, if you're looking for this, is Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is a book that strips away irony so much that you expect the book to go into some sort of naturalistic or realistic account of the exploration of the inner, dark continent. But instead, where it goes is to something that's beyond irony, something that's beyond naturalism or realism, and it goes into this strange spirit zone where at the end of the book, I mean, when Marlowe is describing Kurtz, he says he was a man who had something to say and he said it, which is just.
This is what I think McCarthy does. This is why I appreciate McCarthy.
Exactly.
There's no irony in McCarthy.
Yeah.
You don't read No Country for Old Men and come out of it thinking like, is he making fun of Sheriff Bell? Is he like, you don't get that. You don't get him mocking any of his characters.
Right.
Like he gives them a humanity. He gives them a reality that's stark, and I appreciate that. And I'm not saying I hate anything that involves irony. I'm just giving like this is the reason Lolita is more of a disturbing novel than Child of God is because of the irony, and that's why it's more of a dangerous piece of art. And this is why I think artists should be careful. And I think it's I think that's something we lost, especially with postmodernism, is just the our art, you do have to be careful with what you put out there. It's not just, it's just some words, man. It's just my feelings, my thoughts. It's like, no, there's something behind those thoughts. There's something behind those feelings. There's something behind the people. There's something behind the sentiment of the people they're going to attach to it. And it doesn't mean you have to understand everything about it before you put it out. But I think there's a lot of spiritual danger to flipping artwork, especially music,
Yeah, well, words certainly matter. The best example, I think, is there's actually a great example in the Doors movie, and Jim Morrison actually said this out loud when when Ed Sullivan tried to make
the most totalitarian form of art.
yeah, I believe in a long, prolonged derangement of the senses to attain the unknown. I believe in chaos, disorder, and activities which seem to have no meaning, like this. No, he said.
What do you think? What do you make? You like the Doors movie? That was one of my favorite Oliver Stone films.
Of course, I love it. I love the Doors. I love the Doors movie. I love that. Like John Densmore and Ray Manzarek were like, Jim was nothing like this, man. And Oliver Stone was like, I don't give a shit. It's my movie.
He is now.
Fucking make the movie how I want to. That's why I bought the rights to your book, so I could make the movie. This is my impression of him. Nobody's like this. You know, I think that Jim was. I think he was actually, all of that stuff is a myth. I think it's all a lie. Like,
you don't even think he was 10% that?
No, I don't think so. I think that the Jerry Hopkins. I mean, this is. The No One Here Gets Out Alive is the first book I read in 7th grade that got me like really heavily into literature, Like it was a transition from like being a child into reading actual grown-up literature. Was that book. That's the actual book that did it. And
did I read that? I feel like I think I read Densmore's book. I wonder if I read that too, because it would have been 9th grade.
Well, I had the folks at home will love this story. I've told this story before. I had a 6th grade English teacher named Miss Lewis who played in a ladies football league. Okay. And she got, this is what I remember of her. She got real mad one day and she punched the desk and she had a cast on her arm for the rest of the year. And we had to read Treasure Island. Now, Treasure Island's a great book, but I asked her, because I read Treasure Island. We're supposed to read it like, in a few weeks. And I read it in like 2 days. And I asked her, while everyone else is reading Treasure Island, can I read this book? And I had a copy of Helter Skelter, because my parents had Helter Skelter on the, and I opened the book up and the opening page, and it says the book you're about to read will scare the hell out of you. And I was in 6th grade. I didn't know who Charlie Manson was, but I knew that I liked him. I thought the book looked cool. So I asked her if I could read it.
Like that it said this will scare the hell out of you? Or
I thought that was like interesting. And I wasn't into horror shit at all. I didn't watch horror movies or anything, but I thought I knew something about like conspiracy. I knew something about like the way he looked, and then I knew that like Guns N' Roses had played "Look at Your Game Girl," and like I thought that was cool. So I asked her if I could read the book, and she goes, "No, put that away. You can't read it." I don't know why I listened to her, but I put it away and I didn't read it. Then in 7th grade, I got this teacher named Gene Bruner, and this guy changed my life. And the first day, he had like long hair like I did, and it was cool. And I went into class. And the first day of class, I went in and I said, "Can I read this book, Helter Skelter?" And he said, "Hell yes, read it." And then he goes, "Tomorrow I'm going to bring you something." So he gave me 2 books. He gave me a copy of Led Zeppelin's, the biography of Led Zeppelin, Hammer of the Gods, and the book No One Here Gets Out Alive by Jerry Hopkins about the Doors. He gave them to me and he said, "Read these books, they'll change your life." And they did. And he was the one responsible. He put me in a creative writing class. He like changed my life. He like gave me this love of reading, But anyway, there's a scene in The Doors where Ed Sullivan comes up to them backstage and he says, "Change this song title. I want you, in Light My Fire," which Jim didn't even write, by the way. It was Robbie Krieger. He says, where it says, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher. Can you change it to, girl, we couldn't get much better. Can you dig that? Can you dig that?" And he says, and Ed Sullivan says, "And don't look so sullen when you go out there." And he says, "We're kind of a sullen group, Ed." Anyway, they try to change the lyrics of the song. And they say, "It's just a word, Jim." And Jim says, "Why don't you change your name from Ray to Irving or Sidney Manzarek? It's just a word. It's just a word." So that to me symbolizes the importance of words. God knows who we are. He separates us before we're even born. He knows every hair on our head. He knows our names. Our names are important. Names are important. Words are important. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Words have impact and action. And so I think that was a really good point. Sorry, I went really far to get to that.
No, I like that. That was a fun detour. I love that.
I wanted to read a couple of.
Couldn't get much higher.
Yeah, that's right. And he didn't even write it.
I like he emphasizes it. He goes extra hard on the higher in that scene too.
Higher, yeah. No, but I think that was a lot of that was a myth about him. I don't think he was a acid head, who all this stuff. I think he was I think he was probably a heroin addict from an earlier, from a
I mean,
pretty
he
early
obviously would
time.
have done some LSD, but yeah,
He
it
did.
seems
I'm
like
sure yes, he did. But I think
they
that he
turned
was,
him into. I mean, the whole thing with
yeah,
Pan and I don't.
yeah,
There's some weird stuff that, like in the biography that I read, kind of got into this stuff with his witch girlfriend and their
yeah.
little blood coven stuff. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of weird
Patricia
stuff.
Keneally, yeah, he did. He had a Wiccan wedding. He got married to Wiccan. So, heck at the triple goddess, right? He
Yeah,
got married
yeah.
and all that stuff. So,
I haven't thought about that in a while.
yeah, but there's a couple passages here. One is the one you just read, and you said he says, consider him. He's a man, a child of God, much like yourself, perhaps. And then there's another one here on page. I'm going to read a couple of the other times that he skips into the narrative, into the second person. He says, this is pages 133 to 130.
And that's when the narrative is really going haywire, right? Like the first act is pretty mellow. You're getting introduced to the character. Second act, it starts to get intense. Third act, it's just complete.
He says, this is page 133. He says, it was dark when he reached the cave. He crawled through and lit a match and got the lamp and lit it and set it by the ring of the stones that marked the fire pit. It's just things, just doing things. The nearer walls of the cavern composed themselves out of the constant night with their pale stone drapery folds, and a fault line in the vault ceiling appeared with a row of dripping limestone teeth, like he's in a hellmouth. In the black smoke hole overhead, the remote and lidless stars of the Pleiades burned cold and absolute, just like you read. Ballard kicked at the fire and turned a few dull cherry coals up out of the ashen bones. He fetched dry grass and twigs and lit the fire and went back out with his pan and brought it in, filled the snow and set it by the fire. This is very Jack London. To build a fire, short story to build a fire. His mattress lay in a pile of brush with the stuffed animals upon it, and his other few possessions lay about in the grotto where chance had arranged him, like you said. Then he says, Ballard made his way by damp stone corridors down inside the mountain to another room. Here his light scudded across a growth of limestone columns and what looked like huge stone urns, moist and ill-shapen. From the floor of the room, an underground stream rose. It welled up blackly in a calcite basin and flowed down a narrow aqueduct where the room tailed off through a black hole. Ballard's light glanced from the surface of the pool unaltered, as if bent back by some strange underground force. This is Gollum. Everywhere, water dripped and spattered, and the wet cave walls looked waxed and lacquered in the beam of light. He crossed the room and followed the stream out and down the narrow gorge through which it flowed, the water rushing off into the darkness before him, descending from pool to pool in stone cups of its own devising, and Ballard nimble over the rocks and along a ledge, keeping his feet dry, straddling the watercourse at points, his light picking out on the pale stone down of the stream, white crawfish that backed and turned blindly. This is Grendel. This is Grendel living in the cave in the mountain, going into his mother's home deep inside the mire. He followed this course for perhaps a mile down all the turnings and through narrows that fetched him sideways, advancing like a fencer, and through a tunnel that brought him to his belly. The smell of the water beside him in the trough, rich with minerals, and past the chalk and dung of he knew not what animals, until he climbed up a chimney to a corridor above the stream and entered into a tall and bell-shaped cavern. This is fucked up. Here the walls with their soft-looking convolutions, slavered over as they were with wet and blood-red mud, had an organic look to them, like the innards of some great beast. Here in the bowels of the mountain, Ballard turned his light on ledges or pallets of stone where dead people lay like saints.
That was the whole chapter too. Like that's a whole, not a whole chapter, but like a whole section of that. He breaks it up into 3 sections or 3 chapters, and then there's little chapters within that. And that's so well written. I mean, that's like,
it's great. This really is a kind of subsection where, you imagine Beowulf coming and meeting Hrothgar, and we see Grendel, trudging back to the fen and going inside the mountain and crawling on his belly like a serpent up into this secret anti-Plato's cave where he has arranged human beings in position like of prayer, like dead saints. Like
and that's what I was in. And I was thinking about our conversation. You and I talked about this when we first finished the novel. When I first finished the novel, you think you were like 2 weeks ahead of me, probably. It's there's kind of a critique of Plato here and an inversion of Plato's cave allegory, and it's done in a beautiful way. I think I think that's kind of part of why I think Bloom and some of these people go a little bit too much. Like it's not a Gnostic novel, right? Like it's you don't really find much Gnosticism here. You do find a couple characters expressing somewhat of an idea of like total depravity, but it's not the narrator that's expressing that. There's like a Calvinist, Southern Baptist type character. He gets asked, "What do you think? Do you think people always been this bad?" And he says, I think people the same now as the day God made them." Something like that. But it's not the narrator who says that. It's just kind of it's a weathered old dude who says this, who's obviously, Tennessee Calvinist guy. But, in McCarthy, the Platonic forms are not a higher reality, right? In McCarthy, the Platonic forms are a lower level of reality. There's something you fall into. So you have Lester here, starts out a part of a community, right? But and there is an aspect of the cards he's dealt are tough, right? Like his dad, hanged himself. His granddaddy was kind of a Civil War scammer who was collecting a pension for years but never really fought in the war. It was said he was a white cap. He was never really a soldier. He was a white cap, which was one of these kind of like pseudo KKK groups that were like vigilante. They got kind of out of hand. They had to get taken care of by some of the local authories, and that gets
Knights of the Golden
on.
Circle. Yeah.
So he comes from a dishonored family. He's abandoned as a child. He's traumatized as a kid, but then his choices and his character arc lead him to this kind of inversion of this he goes into the cave. He descends into that cave where the Platonic forms to him are death, right? He comes to embrace death, and not just embrace death as in like, oh, maybe I'm going to kill somebody. He physically communes with the dead. I don't want to get too graphic. We're on YouTube now. He does the deeds with with the dead, which is, it's horrific. So in McCarthy, the Platonic forms aren't a higher reality. They're lesser. And the characters, they'll fix themselves to like this hellish fallen realm that's not as real as creation. It's less real than creation. And it's kind of, it's this like, you mentioned the term black hole there as well. You use that term black hole very intentionally. And so those who despise the light of creation then descend into that darkness through sin and crawl into this warped shadow realm where they become maimed, they become grotesque, and they embrace that deformity. And the culture around Lester isn't this perfect, idyllic, beautiful community, but people do give him grace, and it's real subtle, right? Like he goes shopping for dresses for his dead girlfriend, and the woman's real nice to him. Everybody kind of puts up with Lester. The guy that repairs his axe tries to help him, tries to teach him like, hey, you think you could do this on your own? After I know you like that chapter a lot as well. It's one of my favorites. You want to describe that chapter when Lester gets offered this kind of grace from somebody who is the opposite of Lester, somebody who's developed a skill. It's somebody who's developed a trade. It's somebody who's able to get around in the world. And like the sheriff says to Lester, he says, "Well, I know. Are you coming to?" What does he say to him? He says something about, you coming to grace us working people with your presence or something like that. He basically brings up the fact that Lester doesn't work because Lester is homeless. Lester is homeless by choice and by circumstance. Part of it's the cards that are dealt to him, and part of it's what he does with that. He chooses to become embittered. He chooses to focus on his hatred of those around him. He chooses to focus on death and destruction and darkness. But then there are characters who put up with him, and the community kind of just, hey, it's Lester, and he's not alone in his sin too. He partakes in sins with other characters, and they drag each other down too. You want to add anything to that?
Well, there's another scene where after he has defiled these bodies, and he's I think it's after he's burned the house down and he's taken all the watches, he's collecting his little trinkets, and then he goes into like a bar. He walks into a bar, and there's guys sitting there, and he kind of walks in, and he tries to sell the watches. But they're clearly things that he would not have. And I was wondering in that scene whether they were gonna call him out for this, but they just figured this guy's a collector. He's doing something. I don't know what it is. But then they start doing a Pawn Stars, and he's like, yeah, "Nah, you can't. We're not going to."
He barters with him, right? He talks him down on the price, and he buys all three watches.
Talks him down, and then finally they buy the watches, and then the next guy goes like, "I'll sell you this watch for $7 or whatever." He tries to.
So he does it right in front of Lester. He sells it for more to his buddy, and Lester just kind of looks at him matter of factly in the walks. He doesn't seem that bothered. He's just whatever.
But there's a great scene where he goes and meets this guy who's an axe man, and he's a blacksmith, and he shows him, because Lester goes in and he's like, "I need a new axe handle or whatever," and he's like, "Oh, well, you need it. I'll show you something. I'll pass this on to you."
Yeah, he broke the axe, so he wants the axe fixed, and he needs a new handle.
He's like, we're hard folk. I will give you my time, and I will show you how to make something yourself, and I'll try and pass some knowledge on to you. This is a transient guy walking around. I'm going to give you some purpose. And he gives him this long, like, illustrative lesson about how to temper an axe. And it's obviously you can tell that the voice of the guy doing it, of the blacksmith, is meaning it intentionally, if Lester can get that to be like a metaphor for how we temper ourselves and our character. And at the end of it, he says, "You want to try?" He mentions
the word you want it to be the color of grace. Right. You look for the color of grace, he says.
Yeah. And this is like hard won knowledge. This is like not just a guy giving you a job. He's trying to teach you something important. At the end of it, he says, you want to try it yourself? And he's like, "Do what?" And he's like, he's gone through pages and pages of showing him how to do this thing. And his answer is like, "Do you want to do it?" And he's like, "Do what?" And I think that is emblematic of why. That's one reason this guy kind of exists in this outer zone of it's almost like he wanders around with, it's almost like we don't get a first person narration of the character of Lester doing any of these things because he doesn't have any thoughts. He just does exactly what he's doing. And from, like, there's the scene at the beginning when when it opens and we see that he's watching. He's always watching. Like he's watching through the creeping holes, and he's creeping. Yeah, he's always creeping around. And that brings to mind an interesting thing about the about the societal dynamic in this place, because there are levels of people who achieve in this world. It's like you were saying, it's not like we have a bunch of bog people who just exist in shit and they're all just stupid. I mean, he doesn't give us that. He gives us a real truthful thing, which is that in the midst of utter, it's extreme poverty, we get kind of different types of people. We really get two kinds of people. We get people who are full of grace and who have humility, and they are humble, they're thrifty, and they're wealthy in spirit. And then we get people who are dirty and
humping on trash heaps, just humping each other like animals on trash heaps.
Yes, and they're just unclean and grotesque, and it really is disgusting. I mean, it really does. Speaking of Lolita, I mean, that there is a whole scene where the garbage heap of the world is in the garbage dump, where this guy has fathered this whole harem of offspring, just as this,
and they just act like feral dogs. And he names them. He names them from an old medical book, and his daughter's name is Urethra. And it's a funny passage, but it's there's a lot of truth in it, but it's also really funny, and then it's also horrific and dark and grotesque.
But also, you think about the levels of, like, if this were Virginia or Tennessee, it's Tennessee, but if this were
Ernie Sue, that's what it means. Ernie Sue, that's right.
So, I mean, they still have a I mean, if this were like in the time of Outer Dark, so if it was like in the 1800s, you imagine that the top layer of society, the planter class, is also you're known for being an agrarian gentleman, a gentleman of means, for not working. You don't have a job per se like other people do. You don't have to be a banker or a lawyer. Your job is to be a planter, to own the plantation, and to oversee the thing. And that's like your whole world. And then below that, you have people who you have sort of white collar jobs, and then you have overseers, and then you got, and all the way down to the lowest person. And the lowest person, again, is a person who doesn't have a job. So what is it that separates those two people? And there's a great passage on page 156 where we go into, again, he goes into the second person. I just want to read this really quickly on page 156. He says in the middle of this paragraph, the crate capsized and floated off. Ballard and the log bore on into the rapids below the ford, and Ballard was lost in a pandemonium of noises. So the pandemonium of noises is like floating down the mire in through the mountain. And this is Miltonian again. This is like you were saying, the grotesquerie of a person inside the mountain or at the bottom of the world, and where when you lack grace and you are kind of stripped of everything, you become this sort of evolutional beast creature who like is just living without wits and just eating and feeding. And that's in a way, I mean, in a way it's Miltonian, because even though when Satan and the fallen angels arrive in what they later determine as pandemonium, they have this high-minded metaphysical sense to their purpose. High-minded because they're still focused on God, even though they're at the bottom of the world. They still are laid out like beast creatures. And then he crosses the abyss and literally becomes a creature slithering his way into the garden. And we sort of get a sense of that here, but it's sort of the opposite, like you were saying. Then he says, the rifle aloft in one arm, now like some demented hero or bedraggled parody of a patriotic poster, coming a swamp in his mouth wide for the howling of oaths, until the log swept into a deeper pool and rolled, and the waters closed over him. This is just like Outer Dark, right? With the flood. The flood scene. And then it says, this is a great passage. He says, he came up flailing and sputtering and began to thrash his way toward the line of willows that marked the submerged creek bank. He could not swim, but how would you drown him? His wrath seemed to buoy him up. Some halt in the way of things seems to work here. See him. You could say that he's sustained by his fellow men like you, has peopled the shore with them calling to him, a race that gives suck to the maimed and the crazed, that wants their wrong blood in its history and will have it. But they want this man's life. He has heard them in the night, seeking him with lanterns and cries of execration. How then is he borne up? Or rather, why will not these waters take him? That's a fucking sick passage, dude.
It's so good.
That's
one of the best passages in this book.
Oh my God.
And he does that sparsely too. And he does it. It's not like with Blood Meridian, that's every page, right? But with Child of God, he's punctuating with that. Like you get that's like the chorus, right? You get those little choruses come every once in a while. It's like a prog song. You got to wait like 20 minutes for the chorus sometimes, but when it comes in, it's hard.
It reminds me of all people, it reminds me of Sylvia Plath, because in the poem Daddy, she says, the villagers hate you. They are stamping on your fat black heart. What did she say? Basically she's referencing that she's sort of crossing a vampire and a Frankenstein, saying that the villagers hear about your deeds and they're coming for you, and they're going to put a stake in your fat black heart, and this is exactly what's happening here. They can hear him slurking around in the night, and doing truly.
What's happening here too is oh man, this is one of the best chapters, right? Like everything's going crazy here. He's got those 3 stuffed animals that he won at the fair through his rifle skills. So the one thing he's good at is using a rifle, and he gets these stuffed animals. He ends up getting cut off because he just keeps nailing the target. And the guy tells him, well, 3 is the maximum. He's like, well, you didn't say anything about that before. He's like, yeah, I'm saying it now. Basically, if you're done, you're cut off. And he treats these things, I mean, it's this funny, weird, sad, pathetic thing that he does. He carries them everywhere. And then he has this cabin that he's squatting in. He ends up burning it down. and it's not really a sad thing when he burns it down, but it's pathetic. The way he burns it down is pathetic. And he's in the middle of, of course, defiling the corpses that he's stolen. And then he begins collecting corpses through creating corpses out of humans as well, and defiling those. And he loses the corpse in this fire. And it's like Gollum losing his precious, right? His precious treasure is gone. His precious treasure, which is, of course, this inverted Platonic form that is the corpse in this one. The symbol of the corpse is interesting in this novel. It's hard to say exactly what it means, but it has something to do with that allegory of the forms, and those forms being devoid of life and being something lower that you step into, and death, the stasis of death being a degradation. It's a degraded state. It's not a going back to the universal, it's not going back to the Platonic forms, and then you're gonna reincarnate or something like that. No, death is something death is something grotesque here. Death is not something that you should be that shouldn't be. It's not something to be venerated, right? But Ballard comes to not just venerate death, but wants to copulate with death. Literally wants to copulate with death. But he has these teddy bears, and they're getting swept away, and he sees this log coming. He saw it coming and began to curse. It spun broadside to him, and it came on with something of animate ill will. Get! He screamed at it. A hoarse croak and the roar of the water. It came on bobbing and bearing in its perimeter a meniscus of pale brown froth in which floated walnuts, twigs, a slender bottleneck, erect and tilting like a metronome. Get, goddammit. Ballard shoved at the log with the barrel of the rifle. So he yells, get at it. And it's, there's you mentioned, you mentioned the word crossing, but this passage here where it talks about how a race that gives suck to the mane and the craze, that wants their wrong blood in its history will have it. But they want this man's life. He has heard them in the night seeking with lanterns and cries of execration. How then is he borne up, or rather, why will not these waters take him? That's kind of reminiscent of a passage later in McCarthy's work in The Crossing. So remember in The Crossing when it describes Billy Parham coming back into town out of Mexico in his tattered rags, and how it says something like, if their hearts go out to him, they would also kill him in an instant. They also want him dead. So I forget, he says it a way better way, but it's reminiscent of that passage there. And then also, if you remember at the end, the last act of Billy Parham at the end of The Crossing, like his kind of tragic downfall is complete, or not really a tragic downfall, but when he realizes his how far he's fallen away from humanity, he realizes he's become the heretic that he was warned he could become, is when the dog comes to him, right? So you have this whole first portion of the book, this beautiful relationship between the boy and the wolf, and then in the end of the novel, he's confronted with a dog, which is it's like a lesser form of a wolf. This dog is old. It describes this muzzle as being white. It's spraddle-legged. It's walking around it's got bad hips. It's really skinny, and it's miserable. And Billy Parham sees the wolf, and he sees the dog, and of course the dog is pointing back to this wolf motif, and he yells at it. He throws rocks at it. He yells, "Get!" He tells the dog to get. So I think that's something that you'll see in almost every McCarthy novel. I think in most of them, at some point, one of the characters yells "Get!" G-I-T at somebody, which is like, I've always loved the term "get." Like my dad used to always say "get." It was something he got from his dad, who got from his dad, who got from his dad. So it's
did he yell at the homeless bums trying to squeegee your window when you were
go on now, get,
go on, get.
Anyways, when I see "get" in there, it just kind of gives it makes me feel a little tender-hearted about poor Billy Parham and how he realizes at the end of The Crossing how miserable he is, and he just lays there and weeps in the street after he chased the dog away, because then he realizes that, and he tries to call the dog back, but he's just sitting there alone in the middle of the street.
This is one of the passages. I'm not sure if it's this one, but this is from The Crossing. I covered this book a while back. It's a great book.
It's really good.
I said, there's one page I just opened to, and I wrote, "Fuck." shoot all these people. It says, this is part. It says he'd build his fire in some sheltered swale, and at night, sometimes he'd walk out over the grasslands and lie in the ground in the world's silence and study the burning firmament above him. Walking back to the fire those nights, he often thought about Boyd, thought of him sitting by night at just such a fire in just such a country. He seemed to himself a person with no prior life. On a certain evening just before dark, he entered into a road and turned and followed it west. The red sun that burned in the broad gap of the mountains before him sloughed out of its form and was slowly sucked away to light all the sky in a deep red afterflash. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah, The Crossing is so beautiful, man. That passage, and then when he sees Boyd, when he has a dream of Boyd, like that was the dream, and he says he talked to him, and he knew it was a dream, and he keeps talking to him because he doesn't want him to go away, but he knows he's going away, and because he knows he's got his bones over there on his horse. That the Crossing is beautiful. I think. I think it's underrated. I don't think people talk about The Crossing much. As far as everyone talks about all the pretty horses and what's it called, Blood Meridian. But yeah, The Crossing is very beautiful novel. It's worth reading.
Well, one thing that this book made me think of, because when I first started reading the book and I came across the character of Ballard, I had immediately been thinking about the way that the world, the sort of world is built in this novel, and the way that Appalachistan is described, made me think of this book, The Drowned World, which is by J.G. Ballard. And this book is really, I think that, in terms of, it doesn't matter, but in terms of contemporary or post, like actual postmodern literature, going into, this is before postmodernism. I think that J.G. Ballard and J.G. Ballard and Cormac McCarthy are kind of two of the four pillars of this sort of new literary system in English, and they're so different. Because Cormac McCarthy, like you said, does not write in a dystopian he kind of writes in a
well, even The Road is like The Road isn't really that dystopian. It's more just like the end. Yeah. It's like things stripped down to their pure essence.
Well, what's interesting about The Road is The Road is written. The Road is a post-apocalyptic novel, but it is not written in that style. It's written in an apocalyptic style. And that is different. That's different than a post-apocalyptic style tells us of it's an actual place. An apocalyptic literature deals with what Bloom was talking about, which is the sublime on the edge of eternity.
Yes,
something
that's what The Road is. That's where you are.
Beautiful, and it is so beautiful that it is terrifying. And so that's something we could never imagine before, and it could never have been said in that way.
You know, that early draft of The Road, it was called The Grail. That was the original title.
This you ought to read this. This is a crazy novel. I'm
going to get a copy of that. What is it? Ballard?
I usually fill up just the title page on books with just words and phrases that appear in the book, because I always think that if you can take one thing away, one phrase, one word or phrase away from a novel, I think that really is The Drowned World. Yeah. And there's just the language of this is so incredible. It's a very weird novel because it reads like an adventure. A lot of times these books read like they would be adventure stories, but they go far, far beyond that. They go into something completely, like he says on page
like
41.
The Crossing. And The Crossings,
right.
If you just tell someone what the story of The Crossing is, it sounds like an adventure story.
Yeah.
But it's not really. It's more of a meandering philosophical wrestling match or something,
Yeah. But the reason I bring this up is not because of the character, but because the landscape is one of overhead the sky was an immense funnel of sapphire and purple, fantasticated whirls of coral cloud marking the descent of the sun like Baroque vapor trails. It's an insanely beautiful, it's a sublime novel set in a place. Phantoms slid imperceptibly from nightmare to reality and back again. The terrestrial and psychic landscapes were now indistinguishable as they had been at Hiroshima and Auschwitz, Golgotha and Gomorrah. The innate releasing mechanisms laid down in your cytoplasm millions of years ago have been awakened. The expanding sun and the rising temperature are driving you back down the spinal levels into the drowned seas, submerged beneath the lowest layers of your unconscious into the entirely new zone of the neuronic psyche. You have biopsychic recall. I mean, it's just
that's one sentence. You have biopsychic recall.
That
sounds
wild.
Like a that's
because it's like
the Metallica song. Biopsychic recall.
You can tell this book was like a setup for the book Annihilation, or the book of the movie Annihilation took a lot from this, because it's about basically this book kind of was written before such a thing as global warming as a term, or
is this like an eco-lit type?
It is.
Novel?
It's eco-lit, it's eco-terrorism lit, and it was written. These are his first books, and they existed way before that. So he sort of predicted all this stuff.
Well, I think you're right in connecting those ideas, because McCarthy, you see, he's not a lib global warming like nutter, but you see there's a sappy sentimentality about the state of the natural world. Where you get this in the Crossing a lot with he helped to try to reintroduce the wolves to the Southwest. I think he was kind of instrumental in that and helped out a lot. And they did a lot of work in the 90s to get the wolves back into the New Mexico, Arizona region. And I think there are a lot more wolves now. And but yeah, I think McCarthy, there is something there throughout his books. There's not in like a crazed leftist way, but in like a kind of almost
Teddy Rooseveltian ecological.
Yes, exactly. Roosevelt. That's a good way of saying. I was going to say like a boomer conservationist type way of like this kind of aristocratic sense of like we want the wolves to be there. They're beautiful.
Yeah. No, I've got a buddy who is he's a landman down in Texas. He's like an oil landman, and he's in this ad for this new duck hunting. He's like, they made him a male model now, but it's because he's been a duck hunter all of his life. And I'll send you the ad. He's exactly the guy you're talking about. He is tied spiritually to the land because he wants to pass on something to his children that his father gave to him, and he sees taking care of the land it's quite beautiful, as a kind of shared familial thing that he's received from God, and we're supposed to conserve and take care of this stuff. I mean, we have dominion over the animals, so
and that's why I like with the fact and what he does with history too. Like I wrote something down here. It's like McCarthy's Christ haunted Appalachia, where history's gravity is magnetized like the iron in our blood and pulses the landscape with an energy electric. But it's that there's something there, and it's important. Like he's touching on something important without getting too hokey with it, without getting too corny. But McCarthy's definitely, you could tell he's a sentimental guy. And I think people miss that. They'll characterize him as like dude bro lit. Like it's this heartless, cold, just matter of fact prose. But for me, I think McCarthy, like I see a lot of grace in McCarthy and a lot of aching at the effects of the fall.
Yeah. I just put that in the chat, you guys. What I was just talking about. It's called Outdoor.
Robert says Tristan is poisoning my brain rot linguistics. What did I do? Oh no! What have I done?
Yeah, it's my buddy's ad for Ducks Unlimited. But it's actually a beautiful ad. I'm only sharing it because it's got my friend in it. I
can't hear male model and ad without thinking of the merman ad from Zoolander.
Damn it, Derek!
In your underwear with your wiener hanging out for everyone to see.
I'm not a professional film and television actor. What you get? A center for ants?
Merman.
We talked about that last time, didn't we? About Bret Easton Ellis. That's good. Here, look, Zoolander is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Zoolander is this book,
and he sued him, right? You said he sued Stiller.
Yeah, that is that book.
Do you think it was accidental that Stiller did that?
I think so, probably. I think it was probably things converge like that. But it is.
It's like Zoolander also seems like a plot like that you and I would come up with. Like, oh, it's like MK Ultra, and all the models are gonna kill people, and
well, it's also probably true. You know, I mean, there's some truth to it. But Bret Easton Ellis takes a much more not measured, but a much more. I mean, Zoolander is a parody, but Glamorama is a satire, I would say. So one is it's funny on its surface and is lighthearted. It's also interesting that remember Zoolander was the movie in the Big Nine right before the Big Nine. The ad, and I remember seeing this because I was there. The ad is he's pushing on like the World Trade Center.
Yeah,
remember, and that was the movie that was was playing when the thing happened. That's so fucking crazy.
Ben Stiller did it. Ben Stiller knocked down those towers.
Yeah, he did it.
You know it was you, Ben. It breaks.
But do you guys get what this book is about? Basically, there's a guy who's living in the mountains, and he gets his home taken away from him, and he goes, and then he's great with a rifle until and he's going around the countryside until he finds two people who are seemingly he's kind of a peeping Tom, and he and then finally he kind of like steals some underwear. Then he comes across these teenagers who look like they are getting busy in a car, but they're dead from, I guess, carbon monoxide. So he becomes a N file and takes the body away, then makes it his human puppet where he BTKs the girl or the corpse in the house, putting her up and down in the attic, back and forth.
Did you catch how in the beginning, his dad, he had witnessed his dad had hung himself, right? And then
that's right.
I just noticed the symbolism there of him also dragging the corpse up into the rafters. And in the first scene, Lester's in his house, and it describes that there's a rope hanging from the rafters. And this house is the one he gets evicted from, which you're assuming is his childhood home. So that might have been the same rope that he just left it there and lived among that with the rope that his dad hung himself with in the same house. Yeah,
he and he goes on to do this a number of times, sort of collecting human beings.
He gets hooked. He's addicted.
Yeah, he does, until he finds this one woman. He basically goes in, then he walks outside, shoots her through the window of the house, and then burns the house down. And like you were saying earlier, that
with the child inside of it too.
With the child inside, and the child. So the child inside of the burning house, I think, is supposed to be an inner recreation of himself burning inside of the house with his mother with an absent father. Not in a Freudian sense, but in the sense that he is burning all vestiges of his humanity here, and he can't even find the corpse in the dust.
That's another thing I like is he doesn't go Freudian. Like you could tell, like you never get this idea of Freud permeating his work, and Freud is everywhere in 20th century lit, and it gets so annoying with everybody's got to Freudianize everything. There, he for sure was influenced by Jung a little bit, but with the dreams, Cormac's use of dreams, I like it's tasteful, and the dreams are never directly prophetic, and they're always kind of off in a way. Like they'll kind of point to something symbolically a little bit, but they don't really give too much insight. They just give this kind of like cognate glimpse of some.
This is, I mean, listen, and you may not, I mean, we Heidi says, I guess I definitely won't read that one. Robert says, I won't read that one. Well, look, we read it for you. So that's good. But this is a good book. I'm not saying the deeds that he's done are good. They're horrid. I mean, the guy's dead in sin, but, Ballard in a thin white gown in a thin white room, false acolyte or antiseptic felon, a practitioner of ghastliness, a part-time ghoul is fucking the words in this book are I mean, they're incredible. Look at page.
Well, how about the scene when he goes and sees the woman and he meets the woman and the baby goes to the house? I I forget
No.
how he knows her, but he catches this bird. So it's like he follows
that's
rabbit
right.
paths through these woods. The snow had thawed and frozen over again, and there was a light crust on top now, and the day was very cold. He entered a glade, and a robin flew. Another. They held their wings aloft and went skittering over the snow. Ballard looked more closely. A group of them were huddled under a cedar tree. At his approach, they set forth in pairs and threes and went hopping and hobbling over the crust, dragging their wings. Ballard ran after them. They ducked and fluttered. He fell and rose and ran laughing. He caught and held one warm and feathered in his palm with the heart of it beating there just so. And then it's got this little squiggly line. He does the way that it's the way that can you guys see that? I love it's like he writes on a typewriter, right? So he took a pen and kind of just pencil and just jiggled it across there. It was like dividing the chapter. He came up a rutted drive and passed the roof of a car sliced off and propped on the ground with cinder blocks. A light cord ran across the mud, and underneath the car roof, a bulb burned, and a group of depressed-looking chickens huddled and clucked. Ballard rapped on the porch floor. It was a cold, gray day. Thick gouts of brownish smoke swirled over the roof, and the rags of snow in the yard lay gray and lacy and flecked with coal soot. He peeped down at the bird against his breast. The door opened. "Get in here," said the woman in a thin cotton house dress. He went up on the porch steps and entered the house. He spoke with the woman, but his eye was on the daughter. She moved ill at ease about the house, all tits and plump young haunch and naked legs. "Cold enough for you?" said Ballard. "What about this weather?" said the woman. "I brung him this is a great line. "I brung him a play pretty," Ballard said, nodding to the thing on the floor. The woman turned her shallow, dish-shaped face upon him. "Done what?" she said. "Brung him a play pretty. Looky here." He hauled forth a half-frozen robin from his shirt and held it out. It turned its head. Its eye flicked. "Looky here, Billy," said the woman. It didn't look. A huge-headed, bald, and slobbering primate that inhabited the lower regions of the house, familiar of the warped floorboards. And, dude, so it's like it's so brilliant how he does this, how he shows the dehumanization of this poverty-stricken place where these people, this is how these people see each other, right? There's this communal dehumanization that's happening, and you don't get a sense that he's passing judgment. So it's like when the narration says this, but you're not getting a third person omniscient view. He's not insulting this kid. This is like, these are the feelings and the thoughts and the sentiments of the characters towards this child and the neglect of the child. So it's it didn't look. He calls it an it, right? There's no name. It's just it didn't look. A huge-headed, bald, and slobbering primate that inhabited the lower reaches of the house, familiar of the warped floorboards and the holes tacked up with food tins hammered flat, a consort of roaches and great hairy spiders, and in their season perennially. Here we go. This is so crazy. A consort of roaches and of great hairy spiders in their season, perennially benastied and afflicted with a nameless crud. Perennially benastied and afflicted with a nameless crud. "Here's ye a play pretty." The robin started across the floor, its wings a wobble like lateen sails. It spied the what? Child, and veered off toward a corner. The child's dull eyes followed. It stirred into sluggish motion. Ballard caught the bird and handed it down. The child took it in fat gray hands. "He'll kill it," the girl said. Ballard grinned at her. "It's his'n to kill if he wants to," he said. The girl pouted her mouth at him. "Shoot," she said. "I got something I'm going to bring you," Ballard told her. "You ain't got nothing I want," she said. Ballard grinned. So then a few minutes later, Ballard looked toward the front room. The bird crouched in the floor. The girl appeared in the doorway. "I wish you'd look in here," she said. "What is it?" said the woman. She was pointing toward the child. It sat as before, a gross totter toy in a gray small shirt. Its mouth was stained with blood, and it was chewing. Ballard went on through the door into the room and reached down to get the bird. It fluttered on the floor and fell over. He picked it up. Small red nubs worked in the soft down. Ballard set the bird down quickly. "I told you not to let him have it," the girl said. The bird floundered on the floor. The woman had come to the door. She was wiping her hands on her apron. They were all looking at the bird. The woman said, "What's he done to it?" "He done chewed his legs off," the girl said. Ballard grinned uneasily. He wanted it to where it couldn't run off, he said.
I don't know
love
why.
that line. Ballard grinned uneasily. He wanted it to where it couldn't run off, he said. If I didn't have no better sense than that, I quit, said the girl. Hush now, said the woman. Get that mess out of here. Out of it. Get that mess out of his mouth before he gets sick on it. He wanted it to where it couldn't run off. So that's like the craziest. And this is before Ballard starts collecting the bodies.
So fucked up, dude.
This is like, I'm sorry. I had to read that one. That's like one of the most disturbing passages. But you see what I'm saying? How it's so disturbing, it's so dark, but it's also that it's such a beautifully written passage. And you do get some insight into Ballard there where he says he wanted it to where it couldn't run off, he said. So, of course, Ballard's mother running off, his dad having left this world. So Ballard's view of people, Ballard's view of nature, his view of and treatment of animals, all of this reflects his inner fragmented heart. But you're not given this through a prose that makes you feel schizophrenic to read. It's done in this way that it's aesthetically pleasing to the eye, the way the page is laid out, the way that the thoughts are presented. It's written in this beautiful way, but it's dark and grotesque. So I think this might be, I don't know, this, I would have to say this might be this one and what's it called? And Outer Dark. Yeah. These are maybe the best Southern Gothic novels. Like I can't think of a better example of the Southern Gothic genre because they're not horror. It's not a horror novel. It's not written in a way. There's this humor to it. There's this.
It's horrific, but it's not a horror novel.
Yeah. And it's heavy, but it's also light. It's a weird novel, and it's amazing that he was able to achieve what he achieved with it. I don't know how much of it's intentional, how much of this was the editing process, but what he produced here is something real good.
Yeah. He says, here's some more Gollum on page 154. Ballard's hair hung from his thin skull in lank, wet strings, and gray water dripped from his hair and from the end of his nose. In the night, the side of the mountain winked with lamps and torches. In the dark, Ballard passed beneath them, scuttling with his ragged chattel down stone tunnels within the mountain. When he gets swept along by the flood, by the way, my note was that Noah praises God for the flood and the receding of the waters, and Ballard curses. And then it's
he spends the whole book. It's always just Ballard cursed. He cursed. That's right. He curses a potato for being too hot.
That's right.
A log.
Yeah, nothing moved in that dead and fabled waste. The woods garlanded with frost flowers, weeds spiring up from white crystal fantasies like the stone lace in a cave's floor. He had not stopped cursing. Whatever voice spoke him was no demon, but some old shed self that came yet from time to time in the name of sanity, a hand to gentle him back from the rim of his disastrous wrath. He's a shadow veering dark and mutant over the cupped stone walls, the mutterings of a band of sympathetic apes, Stygian and Mist. It's a fucking sick, dude.
Mist. Yeah, and sympathetic apes. So now I love that line because it's not saying that Ballard isn't listening to demons. It's just saying at that moment the voice, because you also get told earlier he's a malign star kept him.
I said that he becomes a kind of Skittles demon, because he really does. Yes. He becomes like Norman Bates, becoming the mother. He becomes
makeup over himself.
He starts wearing makeup like BTK, and he does exactly the Green River thing. Everyone knows that story about Ted Bundy, who was waiting for old Sparky, the three-legged chair, and they came to him asking about, hey, look, this was the basis for Silence of the Lambs. This is where they came out with Silence of the Lambs. They came to, do you know the story about Ted Bundy? They went to Ted Bundy.
No, I don't know which detail the story you're referring to, but Ted Bundy was living a debauched lifestyle.
Right.
And
when he was caught and he was on death row, and this is right before he went to old Sparky in Miami, they went to him and asked him for if they basically the feds went to him and said, we've got this guy, we call him Green River Killer, and we cannot catch him. So before you go, do you think you could look at the case files and tell us anything? And Ted Bundy and it wasn't out of goodness or I don't know. I can't judge the man's heart, but Ted Bundy looked at the case files and said, is he leaving the bodies are you finding the bodies like on the trail? Next time you find a body in Seattle, if you find a body, don't touch it. He will come back to it in about 3 days. And that's exactly what they did. So they found a body, and they found that that Green River, I guess that's Gary Ridgway, was going back and end filing the bodies just like Ballard does in this book. He takes a person, he sort of dresses them up, he leaves them on a trail, he comes back to it in a state of decomposition and is an end file on the like with the body. And they were like, how did you know that? And he was like, I mean, that's just what you do. That's just the way it goes. And then he was and then Ted Bundy was rode the lightning out of here. But that's exactly what he does in this. And people have seen the pictures of BTK and what he did with dressing up these bodies. And it's the same thing with fucking what's the name of the real Texas Chainsaw guy, dressing up people and posing them in different things. And it's so
this book is 1974, so this is before some of these famous cases.
It's so wild how he does that in this, a part-time ghoul, because he really is playing with the dead. And it's like he is a serial killer in the book. Ed Gein, thank you. He is a serial killer, but the way that we get inside of the story, he's never described as such, and it's almost like a shock when we realize that that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, you don't realize this. You go
crazy.
First, you don't get any glimpse of this until I think it's like the end of the second act. Is the end of the second part that where you actually get to see what he's doing? And there's a sense that he might have been doing this before, because you don't get a full account of where he got all the bodies. Right. So once we get to the end, I think it said there were 7. Was it where there were 7 bodies? Mm-hmm. You're not privy to how he got all of them. You're not privy to how the first bodies ended up dead. But you do know that Lester had friends that were creeping the mountains as well, and he networked with them. And there's this scene where he kind of harasses this woman. He finds this woman drunk, passed out in the woods, and it seems like something bad had happened to her. Well, Lester kind of pokes at her, and Lester becomes like Lester the molester pops out. He tries to catch a look at them titties, and she wakes up and she freaks out on him. And then he snatches her like nightgown off of her, folds it up in his arm, and walks away. And then in the next scene, he's talking to a friend of his, and the friend's like, "Hey, you see that lady? See that lady last night?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, she went to the police." He's like, "I didn't do nothing to her. I got nothing to do with it." The guy's like, "Well, she says you did." He's like, "Nah, that's you and whatever his name, you," and he names another guy. "That's y'all's lookout point." So it's like there's this idea of these kind of half feral folk.
Yes.
That are all kind of
a network
cruising the mountains, and they network with each other. They sell whiskey to each other. They trade stuff with each other.
Just like Son of Sam and Ted Bundy, according to.
And I like how you get this idea that there could be a little conspiring going on, but Lester does become somewhat of he's not a scapegoat because he's guilty, right? He is guilty, but he becomes the focal point of this community kind of outrage, rightly so, because he's a murderer and he's hiding bodies and stuff. But then the community goes, they chase after him, and he ends up getting caught. And then he tells them, "Well, I'll show you where the bodies are." And they tell him, "All right, Lester."
Just like Bundy, he escapes.
So he brings him to the cave.
By the way, I do believe Bundy was a devil. I think he was literally possessed. I think he was actually.
Well, I think Berkowitz also was. I mean, working with Berkowitz said that he was working with a whole network. He was like, I'm working with a group. Yeah. And I think Bundy might have also been a part of this. Have you listened to the Clown and the Candyman podcast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was fantastic. Yeah, that was really good. Anybody who's interested in some of these cases, I think it's not there's not that much about Berkowitz and Bundy, but it's mostly about Gacy. Gacy, and then some other cases that seem to maybe connect. Very odd, right? But anyways, Lester ends up getting caught. He brings,
and he slips away.
he tells the men, so the men are like, they're ready to lynch the guy, right? They're like, they're taking justice into their own hands.
Well, first he gets blasted. Is this when he gets blasted, or is that later on? He gets blasted by the guy through the house. Remember the guy shoots him?
What? I today I reread the first bit, and it's been a couple weeks since I had finished it initially. Do you want to go through some of your notes? I know I just skipped over kind of the third act. We get privy to him. The last, we should read a passage at least from the end. The end is really good, but I like the last.
I said in this chapter around page 186 that they should have kept him. They should have kept his head on a steel cable leash like they do in The Counselor, which is another Cormac McCarthy. He's leading them through the labyrinth like some sort of anti-Daedalus, but he's the Minotaur. Like he's leading them through this maze into the mountain to find the center of the maze, but he is the center of the maze, and he somehow escapes, slipping and slithering through this labyrinth that he set up. And there's a great series of from about page 172. On page 173, it says, taking the corner of the house, 1 foot almost going from under him as he turned and making a vicious slash in the mud. The rifle now in one hand and his thumb hooked over the hammer, mounting the steps in a crazy sort of hopping gait and rushing toward the door. He looked like something come against the end of a spring-loaded tether or some slapstick contrivance of the film cutter's art, swallowed up in the door and discharged from it again almost simultaneously, ejected in an immense concussion backwards, spinning, one arm flying out in a peculiar limber gesture, a faint pink cloud of blood and shredding clothing, and the rifle clattering and soundless in the porch boards amid their uproar, and Ballard sitting hard on the floor for a moment before he pitched off into the yard. And you just think, fucking thank you.
Yeah.
So he
turns this is Greer, right? So this is the guy who had
blasts him, right?
This is the guy who had bought the land that Lester thought was rightfully his, which it seems like maybe Lester's dad didn't pay taxes. Whatever happened, the county gets the land after the death of Lester's father.
He's got a dress and a wig on. At this point, he's a fucking demon walking around, and this guy absolutely blasts him out of this like a slapstick. He
shot him first, right? He shot Greer first, so he shoots Greer. He's been thinking about murdering Greer for a while, and it describes him pointing the rifle at him and taking aim, and just goes bang, and he doesn't shoot him. He practices a few times. He finally goes to kill Greer, which he gains nothing from this. It's not like if he kills Greer, he gets that land. He's just so full of hate that he's like, you know what? I'm going to go kill this freaking guy.
Let me read this last paragraph because it says, even though Greer was shot through the upper chest himself, he wobbled from the doorway with the shotgun and down the steps to examine this thing he'd shot. At the foot of the steps, he picked up what appeared to be a wig and saw it was fashioned whole from a dried human scalp. Fucking
end of the chapter right there too.
I mean, the dude is, and so then he they basically make him, they're gonna lynch him. And then
the next thing is Ballard woke in a room dark to blackness. Yeah. He woke in a room day bright.
Yeah.
so it gives you I love that, the dark to blackness. It woke in a room day bright.
And on page 182, they do have a steel cable slipped over his neck and rested on his shoulders. It was cold and smelled of oil. They are going to hang him. And then he says, I can tell you where the bodies are. And he takes them into this cave, and then he escapes, and he slips off, and he's just gone.
And part of it's because he knows the landscape so well, and part of it's because he's so lean and skinny. He's become even physically something slightly different from the people around him, where he's just able to slip into spaces where they can't.
He's like he's a human spider. Ballard circled this ancient ossuary, kicking at the ruins, the brown and pitted armatures of bison, elk, a jaguar skull, whose one remaining eye tooth he pried out and secured in the bib pocket of his overalls. He tried his failing beam to terminate in nothingness and night. It fell silently. Fell. That's a whole sentence. Fell. And then he basically disappears, and then he
lost.
later on he gets lost, and he finally turns himself. He shows up, and he turns
He goes
himself
lost
in.
for 3 days, right? He gets
Yeah.
lost for 3 days.
There you
And
go.
then, so he gets lost for 3 days. In the night, he heard hounds and called to them, but the enormous echo of his voice in the cavern filled him with fear, and he would not call again. He heard the mice scurry in the dark. Perhaps they'd nest in his skull, spawn their tiny bald and mewling whelps in the lobed caverns where his brains had been. His bones polished clean as eggshells, centipedes sleeping in their marrowed flutes, his ribs curling slender and whitely like a bone flower in the dark stone bowl. He'd cause to wish, and he did wish for some brute midwife to spald him from his rocky keep. So he's stuck underneath this rubble, like in the deep caverns and these limestone caves that he's been crawling through. Now he lost himself in these stone coffins, basically.
Isn't it interesting? For 3 days, he descends into the dead, and then but in a kind of, I don't even know what you call this. He rises again from the dead, but it's like Michael Jackson, Night of the Living Dead Thriller style, like pokes up through the grass.
Yeah,
and he's this living dead creature. He's now gone full ghoul. He's
when was the scene where he weeps? Remember, is it before this? Remember when he weeps? There's one scene where he actually cries, and it's when he's like, is it the next page? I gotta find that.
This is that is let's see. I think that's when I think that's when he's caught, and he's in the dirt.
Before that, I think he's like walking. He's wandering alone, and he's thinking he has a dream or something. He's a memory, and he just thinks this is it. I'm done for, and he starts crying. Here's what happens when he gets caught. This is real funny. When he reached the highway across over.
I found it. Yeah, it's on page 170. He watched the diminutive progress of all things in the valley, the gray fields coming up, black and corded under the plow, the slow green occlusion that the trees were spreading. Squatting there, he let his head drop between his knees, and he began to cry. He's dead. Yeah, that's where I wrote. He's dead in sin. He had resolved himself to ride on, for he could not turn back. And the world that day was as lovely as any day that ever was. And he was riding toward his death.
Oh, this right here, he says, lying awake in the dark of the cave, he thought he heard a whistling, as he used to when he was a boy in his bed in the dark, and he'd hear his father on the road coming home whistling, a lonely piper. But the only sound was the stream where it ran down through the cavern to empty it. What is it? How is that even? All right, a lonely piper, but the only sound was the stream where it ran down through the cavern to empty it. Maybe an unknown seas at the center of the earth. He dreamt that night that he rode through woods on a low ridge. Below him, he could see deer in a meadow where the sun fell on the grass. The grass was still wet, and the deer stood in it to their elbows. He could feel the spine of the mule rolling under him, and he gripped the mule's barrel with his legs. Each leaf that brushed his face deepened the sadness and dread. Each leaf he passed, he'd never pass again. They rode over his face like veils, already some yellow, their veins like slender bones, where the sun shone through them. He had resolved himself to ride on, for he could not turn back, and the world that day was as lovely as any day that ever was, and he was riding to his death. Yeah, that's the most human you see him, right? Like that's the only time where you get this sense of him contemplating ultimate things or anything beyond what he's going to eat or whatever. The only other thing he thinks about is where he's going to get food, how he's going to steal some money. And how he's gonna, get further into sin. But then you get this little glimpse there.
So let me read what happened to him, because he turns himself in and he says, "I'm supposed to be here."
You got to read that last couple pages there. Yeah, like before.
Yeah, I'm gonna read this part. He's never indicted for a crime. And he does. Oh, there is a great part. Yeah, right before that. So after the bone flower and the spotted glass, he does. and
Page
he's
190.
cast out. This is page 190. He's cast out among the stars, about among the stars for some kind of guidance, but the heavens were a different look that Ballard did not trust. And then he sees a bus go by, and he sees himself in the bus. He sees himself as a little boy. He's trying to fix his mind where he'd seen the boy, and he remembers the image of the face in the glass, and he sees that it's himself. So then he goes and he kind of slithers around. He's gotten out of the earth, and he goes up to the police station, and he turns himself in. And then he's never indicted for a crime, but they put him in a mental hospital. He dies of pneumonia. And then it says on page 194, because this is a real payoff, he was returned to the state hospital at Lyons View, and 2 mornings later, he was found dead in the floor of his cage. His body was shipped to this is real McCarthy right here. His body was shipped to the state medical school at Memphis. There in a basement room, he was preserved with formalin and wheeled forth to take his place with the other deceased persons newly arrived. He was laid out on a slab and flayed, eviscerated, dissected. His head was sawed open and the brains removed. His muscles were stripped from his bones. His heart was taken out. His entrails were hauled forth and delineated. And the 4 young students who bent over him like those haruspices of old perhaps saw monsters worse to come in their configurations. At the end of 3 months, when the class was closed, Ballard was scraped from the table into a plastic bag and taken with others of his kind to a cemetery outside the city, and there interred. A minister from the school read a simple service. And then finally, a cool wind was coming from inside the earth. The earth opens up. They've never found his victims. And what they did find was a chamber in which the bodies of a number of people were arranged on stone ledges in attitudes of repose. And then it says, the sheriff, I'm going to skip down here to the middle of this page. The sheriff and the deputy made a noose from a rope, and they slipped it around the upper body of the corpse and drew it tight. So again, we have this image of descent and the noose. And then they called for a rope. The rope drew taut, and the first of the dead sat up on the cave floor. The hands that hauled the rope above, sorting the shadows like puppeteers. Gray, soapy clots of matter fell from the cadaver's chin. She ascended, dangling. She sloughed in the weem of the noose. A gray rheum dripped. In the evening, a jeep descended the log road, towing a trailer in the bed of which lay 7 bodies, bound in muslin like enormous hams. As they went down the valley, and the new fell dark, basking nighthawks rose from the dust in the road before them with wild wings and eyes red as jewels in the headlights. That's it.
That's it. That's the last paragraph. I mean, he could have ended it just with, at the end of 3 months, when the class was closed, Ballard was scraped from the table into a plastic bag and taken with others of his kind to a cemetery outside the city, and there interred. A minister from the school read a simple service. That could have been the end too, right? Like he's got kind of 2 endings there. You know, I wanted to say that term. I had to look that term up. Haruspices. The haruspices are basically like witch doctors who would scry the entrails of animals to try to look for signs of, tell the future, basically, by scattering the entrails of the of these animals. So it's an interesting comparison there with the way that he's treated, the coldness and that sterility and that dehumanizing process of dissection, where it's you're supposed to be disturbed by this passage, right?
Yeah.
And it's describing a medical scientific procedure, right? This is just science. We have to study the bodies. We have to we have to see, maybe we can find some sense of why he did what he did. Maybe we can find in his matter some way that we can something that we can learn about his inner being. And it compares this with the haruspices. And so it's showing that brutality and also the superstitious nature of materialism, which I like that a lot. And it actually, that passage is a direct reference to the end of Dostoevsky's Demons, where Stavrogin hangs himself. So Stavrogin is discovered hanging there, and I'll find the last paragraph here is really it's actually very funny. So The strong silk cord upon which Nikolai, how do you even say that word? The strong silk cord upon which Nikolai had hanged himself, evidently prepared and chosen beforehand, was heavily soaped. Everything indicated premeditation, consciousness to the last minute. Our medical men, after the autopsy, completely and emphatically ruled out insanity. So, we've got him going to the insane asylum here, and then being scraped from the table into a plastic bag, and the haruspice is there. So I think I gotta say, I think McCarthy does a little better there with the prose, because it's both harrowing and funny, and actually portrays the same idea that Dostoevsky's portraying there at the end of Demons, of trying to scry the body of somebody in order to get a sense of what's going on in their internal state and in their soul, and the dehumanization that scientism has brought about. I like that. I really like the way that it ends there.
Yeah, it reminds me of damn Hellraiser. The mind, or they're flaying him open. It's kind of a hell on earth. I'm looking for where Bloom talks about McCarthy in the Western canon, and I probably won't be able to find it.
There's a quote from Bloom where he says, that he's the continuation of Shakespeare and Melville and Faulkner. He's like, he gives some high praise.
Yeah, he does.
Really loves McCarthy.
Here's what he said. I'll read this real quick. This is what he says about the. Let's see. He says, the sage of the American religion, for all his reticences, revealed himself totally in his writings. The poet of the American religion, shouting his confidence, has concealed almost everything. Emerson, he talks about Emerson here, is a wisdom writer. Whitman has no wisdom to impart. We do not miss it. He gives us his torment and his division, his weird faculty of a self that is both the knower and the known. You cannot distinguish between the ontological and empirical selves in his best poetry. By the standards of continental dialectics that ought to render even his best poems incoherent, to make them forerunners of Pound's cantos. He says, and then he says here, he says, what replaces wisdom or philosophical insight in him is what Blake called vision. Blake, being more urgent, as suited an apocalyptic, meant by vision a program for restoring the human. Whitman's vision is more modest, despite his American bravura. He says the Whitmanian psyche is something about the American religion. It's unfinished, but being another project in perpetual process. He goes on to talk about Pentecostalism and Gnosticism as the American,
which they're very similar. Like I think people religion. Don't realize the similarities between kind of 19th and 20th century Protestantism and Gnosticism. I mean, the Protestant reformers, a lot of them got their exegesis for the Old Testament from the rabbis, and the Protestant Reformation happened right after Kabbalah was kind of externalized, and a lot of the Kabbalic texts were circulating around. There was a huge disappointment at a failed Messiah for these Kabbalist rabbis. That happened in 1666, and so there's this disappointment there, and there was still a lot of energy and a lot of hope that this Messiah would come. And those rabbis are where many of the 18th, 19th century Protestant scholars were getting their ideas about the Old Testament, about exegesis, and about their hermeneutics for reading the scriptures. And Pentecostalism is highly Gnostic in its right. And America is very Gnostic in general. This is what's part of the troubling aspect, part of the troubling nature of American literature is that Gnosticism is almost always there in some form or another. It's always right beneath the surface.
Bloom puts Cormac McCarthy in what he calls the chaotic age, and he gives a canonical prophecy. It's interesting because he doesn't delineate between modern and postmodern. He says
I kind of like that. I think there's
he talks about
yeah.
cultural prophecy and what I've omitted seem to me fated to become period pieces. Even their multiculturalist supporters will turn against them in another 2 generations or so in order to clear space for better writings. What is here doubtless reflects some accidents of personal taste, but and idiosyncratic inclinations. But he is talking about things that are not period pieces, and that things that will live forever, but that are part of what he calls the American sublime and the American grotesque. So,
The
so that
American grotesque.
is,
I like that. Yeah, I'd say
yeah,
that sums up
yeah,
this novel, right? It's like
yeah, for
the
sure.
sublimity of the grotesque, the American sublime grotesque. And
Yeah.
it's it's the dripping waters in a limestone tomb.
Yeah, it is certainly a phantasmagorical novel, but it seems like it reads like a realistic one, and it's just so fantastic. Should we do some super
So yeah,
chats real
can
quick?
you rank? I got a question for you. Do you
Yeah,
have any favorites? Like I know you've done a lot of like McCarthy's
yeah.
stuff. You have any favorites from him?
Well, I would put my favorites. It's
I hate asking that. I hate to ask
no,
because I have a
it's
hard time
interesting.
picking favorites of anything.
No, I have particular favorites, but my favorites run on an sort of a. It's hard to determine. What did Obama say? My metric for determining my metric. That's where I learned the word metric was from Obama. Metric. My metric for determining favorites is nuanced like anybody else's is, I think. But I think that it's hard for me to choose between Blood Meridian and No Country for Old Men because
Mm.
and it's not because of the story or anything like or what the characters are doing, or it's because I especially like the violence of language. I like a kind of McCarthy is reminds me a lot of my favorite poet Rimbaud, because Rimbaud was a poet of the he wrote prose poetry, which again is an oxymoron, but somehow exists. It's a paradox that like any paradox, it's something that should contradict itself, but it does exist. It points to some truth, and it's simply the best words in the best order, I guess. And I think the passages in Blood Meridian and No Country for I like for instance, I like No Country for Old Men because like I like when the guy comes in and he's asking the Green Beret guy, like, what kind of a guy Anton Chigurh is, and he's like, he's a psychopathic killer. Like
Yeah.
that is so good to me.
He's like,
That is
how
so
dangerous is
sick.
he? He's like, you mean
Yeah,
compared to the
he's
bubonic
and those
plague?
those words are so good to me. I think that
Well, I read No Country after I'd seen I saw the film and I didn't read the book because I have a hard time reading novels after I've seen a film because it just taints
yeah,
it for me, right? Like
yeah.
and I saw No Country for Old Men probably 20 times before I read the novel, and I was surprised at. I thought that the novel, I knew it had followed it closely, right? But I was really surprised at how Sheriff Bell's character was
Yeah.
further developed, and how his character, he was a great character already, but man, the his war guilt that he had, like his World War II experience, and those conversations, the conversations he has with his uncle, it's even more beautiful in the novel.
Yeah. The kind of way that No Country for Old Men is written in it's so spare. It is such a spare novel.
Well, I had a hard time removing Anton. I'm sorry, not Anton Chigurh, but Javier Bardem's character, because the description of him is different. He's blue-eyed. He's got blonde hair, and it just describes him as basically. I don't know. He looks kind of like every man. When the kids,
I love this part. This is my favorite. This is why I love No Country for Old Men. This is page 141 of the book. He says, somewhere in the world is the most invincible man, just as somewhere is the most vulnerable. That's a belief that you have? No, it's called statistics. Just how dangerous is he? Well shrugged. Compared to what? The bubonic plague? He's bad enough that you called me. He's a psychopathic killer, but so what? There's plenty of them around. That passage to me is I can't explain it, but that is like
It's his best some of his best dialogue.
It's like magic to say the fact that the phrase "the most invincible man exists" is so obvious, and it should be something that exists, that has always existed, but I've never seen those words put together like that.
Why do you think they didn't put that line in the film? That's one of the best lines in the book. Why did they strip that out for the film?
I don't know, but they didn't cut much. I think because
a great line.
I think because for that they didn't cut much from the book for the film, but I think it was because for that they realized they didn't need to tell us that about the character, because they could show us in how he was portrayed. Kind of like when you have a soliloquy in a film, you can just simply have a voiceover now. We don't need to have a character speaking a lot. It's kind of
it works in the novel. It might not work on screen because it's like to have an actor actually say it. It kind of feels unnatural, but to read it, it doesn't feel unnatural on the page. But that line probably would feel unnatural in the film. I guess I get it, but it's a freaking amazing line.
And then Blood Meridian. I think Blood Meridian is his best work, but it's hard to say what that means by best.
Now, what do you like? All the Pretty Horses?
All the Pretty Horses is my least favorite.
No way! Wow,
yes, my least favorite. And I'll tell you
what is it? Why is that?
I'll tell you why it's my least favorite. It's my least. This seems very petty, but it's my least favorite because the title's too long for me, and it contains the word "pretty." Yeah, I hate that it does that. Yeah, and I get it. I'm not criticizing what he did. I'm not criticizing the use of it.
If he had a different title, do you think
I don't know? Up on your list? I don't know, because it does. And
what's weird is I didn't read it for so long because I hated the title. But when I finally read it, I love that novel. Like, it is one of the most beautiful. Like the end of that description at the end, and the last line, he ends it with the world to come. He ends it with the last words of the Nicene Creed. Like that was like that was just, to me, that last description. And when he's sitting, he called her his abuela, and he stands there and cries. And then I love the end of All the Pretty Horses, but it is a horrible title. But after I read it, I loved it so much that I ended up changing my mind on the title, and now I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me now.
I think that one word titles are supreme. That's why, when I'm writing,
what would you title it if you go back in time? What would you title that book?
I don't know. That's not. I can't.
The Crossing Part 1.
The title is it. I mean, I think that I want to say, like, I love the title No Country for Old Men because it's Yeats, because it comes from William Butler Yeats. And so and Blood Meridian is like such a fucking sick title, dude. It's like I've always loved the word meridian, because I know Meridian, Mississippi, and there's a Meridian Street near me, and I love that's a beautiful word to me. There are that's why I like Cormac McCarthy, I like J.G. Ballard, I like Bret Easton Ellis, and I like Don DeLeo, because they love, and like Shakespeare, they love words. They love, like, they chew on words. Words are they love language, and they don't need to tell me that. I can see it in the writing here. Like, listen, I'm just gonna read this real quick from Blood Meridian, because there's a lot to pick from. But he says, in that gray storm light, they crossed a flooded plain with the footed shapes of the horses reflected in the water among clouds and mountains, and the riders slumped forward and rightly skeptic of the shimmering cities on the distant shore of that sea whereon they trod miraculous. They climbed up through rolling grasslands where small birds shied away, chittering down the wind, and a buzzard labored up from among bones with wings that went whoop, 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 like a child's toy swung on a string in the long red sunset. The sheets of water on the plain below them lay like tide pools of primal blood. Blooms reaching onward like gingham print to the farthest serried rimlands blue with haze, and the adamantine ranges rising out of nothing like the backs of sea beasts in a Devonian dawn. The gray and driving rain, they looked like the wardens of some dim sect sent forth to proselytize among the very beasts of the land. The signs and wonders. Fucking, like, that is unbelievable spiritual language. It's like, again, it's like, to me, it's like writing in the most, it's writing in extremis, writing at the point of death. This is like writing, I'm reading words that I never could imagine before. The closest thing I can think of in a work of prose is like reading Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is a book that, to me, is like, I can't imagine those words being said. And it's like, this is what Neuralink is. They sell Neuralink as. This is like you put words, you printed words on a page in blood, and you jacked them into my brain straight through an invisible cable. Like I could not imagine those words being written on a page, and I can't even express what they mean, but they go right into my brain, and I can feel them in my bloodstream. This stuff gets me really excited. So those two are my favorite books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you can go wrong with them. I mean, they're great choices.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you don't like All the Pretty Horses, but I
like it.
I also don't like the title, or least favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved All the Pretty Horses. I think the Crossing's amazing too, but I think All the Pretty Horses, I don't know if I'd rank it above The Crossing. They're just so different. They really do. Both those books stand alone, and I'm looking forward to getting to Cities of the Plain.
Yeah, the Road is the one that terrified. The Road is the one that is the most disconnected, and that I came around to as something that was totally misunderstood and is completely beautiful. The Road, when I saw the film, when it came out, and The Road
was awful.
The movie terrified me, man. It's just something so. The fact that he was carrying around this pistol with one bullet and with two bullets, and it was meant for them and not to shoot other people. And he's got his son with him, and they're these cannibals. Dude, that shit really fucking freaked me out. It really got something way down deep in my core. And the book is beautiful.
Yeah.
The book is positive and hopeful.
No, the book is so, I mean, to me, like, the book was one of the most it's one of the most beautiful books ever written.
Yeah.
I mean, and the prose is simple. There's a few passages where it gets a little bit more complex, and it's some of his best writing, and I think it's some of his most heartfelt writing. I don't understand how people can read that and say it's so nihilistic. Like, if people read The Road, it's very nihilistic. Not at all. I mean, The Road is all about grace, and it's his most blatant. I think that what he does with The Road is throughout all of his works, but in The Road, it's so distilled, and it's like the essential oils of that.
Yeah.
I haven't read The Passenger and Stella Maris, but I kind of wish The Road was his last novel because it's so perfect. I think the ending of The Passenger. I got to read it. I'm open to liking it. I'm open to liking it.
I think it was underrated. I mean, I'm reading this book right now. I'm still trying to make my way through it, The Angel Esmeralda by Don DeLeo, and it's disappointing because it's a book of short. So I mean, there's some good stuff in it, but his other work is so powerful to me. It's so good. But hey, guess what? To folks at home, especially if you're looking for a work of power, of powerful words, powerful verse, why don't you buy a copy of my book, Runes? If you want to read about violence and megalomania and all sorts of wild characters, please check out my book, Runes. I will be revamping the book. I'll be making the print bigger. I'll be expanding the pages and doing some other couple of things because I'll be putting out a second edition of the book because it's sold enough copies for that. So, but please check out my book, Runes. I'll also be putting it up on, I really got to get it on the Alternate Current Radio website so I can figure out a way to do signed copies in case anyone's interested. But please support me by buying this. It's only $12. I put it on Amazon. I was the #1 living poet for about 3 days or something like that. So please buy a copy of this. It's very cheap because I realize it may be the only book of poetry some people ever own, and also because it's I don't make very much money. I have made a significant amount of money if they pay me for it, however, but I really appreciate that. And
Well, I bought a copy. I'm still waiting for it to ship to me.
Wait.
Not that it takes long for them to ship, but I had to freight forward it to another country. So
yeah. We also got a super chat here from Emmanuel a while back with a Mexican 50. Hey, thank you so much. He said, LOL, great impressions. I'm so ignorant. I don't get half the stuff, but this channel helps me fake intellect to myself. Always great content. Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. That's good. That's a high compliment. This should be your center for culture. We do all kinds of shit here, dude. We do movies, books, music. I've done streams on the Smiths. Like way back, I did a whole stream on Britpop. So come on, y'all.
He'll fix your sink if you want. He'll come to your house and fix your plumbing.
That's right, dude.
You do it all here.
Yo, hey,
you want someone gang stalked? We'll gang stalk your friends for you. We'll gang stalk your ex-wife.
That's right.
We'll gang stalk your girlfriend.
Right. We're interested in a few things here. Yep. We're interested in a few things here: instigating, gang stalking. And flexing.
Yes. Mogging. We will mog. We will personally show up and mog your least favorite coworker.
Shouts out to Tyler out there who sent $5 on Cash App. Bazed and Haggard for the Get Bazed and Haggard Muscle Fund. Cheers, buddy. Really appreciate that. And thanks to our friend Jason out there who drops $10 on PayPal. Really appreciate you, buddy. Also, again, I want to thank Ethan who supported me a while back now. Really, thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate your support, especially while I was going through when we were on the honeymoon, we were getting engaged. You guys, your support really meant a lot. So you allowed me to get some wedding gifts. Thank you so much. All right, buddy. What else we got? We're gonna do Cities of the Plain coming up.
Yeah. Has anyone in the chat read Sutri? I don't know if I never had that much interest in reading Sutri, but I bought a copy of it.
I did too.
Yeah, we could do Cities of the Plain next. I started reading it and then I kind of slowed down because I just finished The Crossing and I was like jumped right into it. I don't know. I like sometimes spacing out books from the same author.
My dad just sent me this one, The Fort.
Oh, bro, I just
Cartel.
I just finished that. Where'd my copy go?
This one?
Yeah.
No way.
I just read that. That's a
hell yeah, dude.
We could do that. You want to do that?
Yeah, dude. Let's talk about that.
All right. You want to do it? How long will it take you? I just finished it like 2 weeks ago.
I don't know.
Let me know. I'm down.
Yeah. Looks like a quick read. This one right here.
No, it's easy to get through it. It's weird reading something like that after reading like Blood Meridian. It's like, oh, let's just freaking flip through this real quick.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Okay, buddy. Hey, you guys, thank you so much out there. Don't forget, please leave a like, smash that like. Go to the entire Cormac McCarthy playlist that I have on here. Please, please buy my book. And anything else you want to share?
No, thanks, man. It's always fun. I love it's you know what I love doing these analyses with you because you mark all the same passages that I mark. You notice all the same things. So like I can always count on you I'll be thinking of like 10 different passages and I'm like, and I'll forget because we'll talk about Jim Morrison or something for 40 minutes. And then and then you'll just rip out the same page and I'll know exactly what passage you're going to go for. So I love doing these, man. It's fun.
Yeah, it's good. I appreciate it, man. Cause it's good to do some literary analysis. Hey, yo, shouts out to Quinn right there who also dropped $5. Thank you so much, Quinn, on PayPal. Thank you so much, buddy. That's a late one in there. Thanks, man. Really appreciate you. Thank you all for your support. Please don't forget to share and like, and please smash that like. Help me get up to 1,000.
This one? You have this one? Do you have a copy of Empire of the Summer Moon?
No, I don't have that one.
It's about the Comanche. I don't know, it seems interesting.
No, I'll check that out.
I haven't started it yet, but I'm planning on doing this one at some point.
Yeah. Zella asks, any required reading before touching McCarthy? I mean, no, not really. I would dive into something like what would you read first with McCarthy? I would read The Road.
That's hard. I would give different recommendations to different friends. Like if I got a friend who just had a kid, I'd tell him read The Road. Yeah. If I had a friend who just whose wife's pregnant or something, The Road. If it's just I mean, No Country for Old Men is probably the easiest, quickest one to read. If you just
Crossing is probably the most emotional, I think, for me. That one was pretty hard to read.
The Crossing End. I think All the Pretty Horses is a good introduction. You just tell them, look, this title sucks, but check out the book, see if you like it. I think that's a good one too. That one, The Crossing's a tearjerker. I think All the Pretty Horses is also like the end of that get you crying too. But it's hard.
I would leave Blood Meridian off. I mean, it's a
do that later.
Yeah, it's a pretty specific read. What's great about McCarthy, by the way, is that he is so different from someone like Proust or like James Joyce or Thomas Pynchon or somebody. I mean, reading Thomas Pynchon, there's a new Thomas Pynchon novel out, by the way, which I thought I might. If somebody wants me to read that and cover that, I'll do it. But I'm not going to do Gravity's Rainbow unless somebody gives me like $1,000 to read it.
Do this one. A friend of mine. I told my friend, I was like, dude, I can't read Pynchon. He annoys the hell out of me. But he was like, get Crying of Lot 49. Try that. So I got that, and it's short. Maybe we should do that at some point.
We could. I mean, Lot 49.
You hate him already. I also hate him.
I do. I really do hate him. But what's great about McCarthy is that he's much more accessible than someone like especially like Joyce. I mean, I really Joyce and Faulkner, and I've covered both. Are not, they are to some people. I have a friend who loves James Joyce, and he sort of swears by Finnegan's Wake and stuff, but I just don't care. I just don't. I have a particular taste.
Your friend likes Finnegan's Wake?
He likes Finnegan's Wake, and he likes Ulysses. I don't know how you like Ulysses. I mean, I get it, I guess, but I just can't. I just don't. It's just not.
I don't know why I have this book. Listen to this. River run past even Adams from swerve of shore to bend of bay brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to Howth Castle and environs. Sir Tristram, Violor d'Amour, for over the short sea at Passencourt re-arrived from North America. I'm like, what the hell is this?
Dude, how did
anyone finish that book?
Yeah, I don't care about the people. I just don't
read this.
Yeah, I don't. I just don't care.
This book. Let's see when this was printed. This was like my grandmother's book. I would not have bought this book. I bought a copy of what's it called, Ulysses, but I never could get through it. I got through like the first part of Portrait of an Artist, but I didn't.
Yeah,
this was 1959. And nobody's read it. This book literally this is a 1959 printing. This book, it was first published in like 30 something. Nobody's ever read this book printed in 19. Not a single page has been touched because this book is unreadable.
Yeah, it's a good book. If you want something like Joyce, like Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray is fucking awesome. That is a great book. It's a driving book with deep symbolism, and it's beautiful and horrific, and it's fun. It's like a fun book.
What did Oscar Wilde do? Did he get? I feel like I heard recently somebody say he was canceled. He's problematic. Did he do something?
He was a gay guy.
He's a gay guy.
Yeah, yeah. He went.
Well, he is problematic.
Yeah, he went to Reading jail. So he was the first. He was like one of the first guys who was canceled because he was having love affairs like with dudes or whatever, but he was put in jail for the Anti-Sodomite Act, and he actually went and then basically killed him or whatever. But I think Oscar Wilde, it says he converted on his deathbed. I think Oscar Wilde was a great writer. He was a great writer, and he was aside from his personality and being a bon vivant and dandy and all that stuff. Sometimes I'm not really interested in the personal lives of people, not because I am, whatever. He was a great writer, and all the other shit, I get it. You know what I mean? A lot of times people are misunderstood also, or are propagandized. Like Rimbaud, who is my favorite poet, is held up as a Skittle, as a proto Skittles archetypal, rainbow poet hero, and he was. My thesis with him, and I've read every book about him, and I've got every translation of his work, is that, and his diaries and everything, is that is totally not what he was. I think that he was crept on and taken advantage of by Verlaine. That's why, I mean, Verlaine shot him in the wrist. He shot him, and Verlaine went to prison for being a sodomite, and Rimbaud ran away. I mean, he literally ran away, and he never wrote again. And he became a gun runner and a slave trader in Africa.
What?
In Aden? Yes, in Aden. He was the first white guy in Aden, parts of Abyssinia, and he lived in Yemen and Oman, and he was all over the world, and he never wrote a single other word, and he died at age 37. And he had a hell of a life, and I think that that is partly what did it. He was a genius, but I think he was, they like to say that he was this kid, and he was, he walked into this thing and he was partners with Verlaine. Like Bob Dylan even has a song about it, but I don't think that's at all what happened. I think he was fucking crapped on by this guy, and
that's weird.
He terrorized him. So I think that, a lot of times we it's hard to know, I think, about these people and the way that history kind of changes the interpretation of certain people.
So it just changes over time. Like now Tchaikovsky was gay, apparently. Everyone swears Tchaikovsky's gay. I don't know if I buy that. Like there's a lot of these guys where they're just trying to retcon them into everyone's everybody's a Skittles guy.
Yeah. And ultimately, for me, it's kind of like Mozart's a great example of this. I don't care what people say now or in the future about Mozart. I don't care. What I know is
they're trying to say he's gay. He was gay too.
No, they're not saying that. But I mean, it's like Mozart was a Mason. Well, yeah. I mean, the Magic Flute's a Masonic opera. I mean, he was in. It's part of his network. I mean, he lived during the literal Enlightenment. I'm sure he probably knew Weishaupt.
Yeah, everyone was a Mason.
But the fact is, at some point, I don't give a shit anymore, because Mozart to me is the paradigm of the genius who created divine work. And I think that he, the Mozart's Requiem is one of the greatest things that man has ever made. I really don't think, I'm not even sure anything surpasses.
Better than Gravity's Rainbow? No.
Yeah. Better than the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock.
Better than what's that movie when Tom Cruise dies a million times trying to freaking just gets reset over and over again? Better than that.
No, that movie's good. Yeah.
Better than Mission Impossible 2?
Yeah. Mission Impossible 3 is good. Humpty Dumpty.
Mission Impossible 3 is amazing. Yeah, no. So the fourth one's, all of them are good except the second one. I haven't seen the last one though.
Well, I'm teaching.
Someone said Jason Miller says Rilke is Pynchon's favorite poet. That's weird.
I don't like you. You know why I don't like Rilke? No, he says Rilke, but you know why I don't like Rilke? Because he's another guy with a woman's name in his name, Rainer Maria Rilke. I don't like that.
But I like him because he took Nietzsche's love interest and totally embarrassed Nietzsche. So that's why
I don't like that when I go to a bookstore and the first thing I judge a bookstore by its poetry section. So I've always done it. And I go into the bookstore and I go to the poetry section and I see if they have Rimbaud and Ted Hughes. Yeah. And if they don't have Rimbaud and they have Rilke right next to it in the RI section, I leave.
You leave. You urinate on the shelf.
I straight up leave.
You you spit. He spits on it like Lester Ballard and walks out. Well, you don't like the Dueño elegies or Rilke has some.
I don't like Rilke. No, I don't like Rilke at all.
Because you got girl name. You're just a bully, bro.
I just don't like that shit, dude.
I just don't like it.
I just don't like it, man.
Rilke was gay, bro.
Yeah, I don't like that, man. I don't like that.
You know what? I think we could all agree that James Joyce, I don't even care if he was a homosexual or not, but he was gay. I call it.
Well, James Joyce, James Joyce was a notorious drunk, and Ernest Hemingway has some things to say about him in A Movable Feast. Hemingway's best book is A Movable Feast.
It sounds like the pot calling the kettle.
Well, James Joyce was blind. He was another Miltonian. He went totally blind. So he dictated his work to his daughter who wrote it. That's why he's got that eye patch and that famous.
Wait, he
looked cool in
dictated
that one
this
picture.
crap? He dictated.
I think he dictated
He
it. Yeah,
sat there, dude. He was a masochist. What a bastard. He
yeah.
sat there and made his daughter write The Fall. Baba Balagara
Baba Booey.
This is
Baba
James
Booey.
Joyce sat there and said that to his daughter and made her write.
Yeah, dude, he was
that.
the real Jack Torrance.
That the Humpty Hill head of himself promptly sends an unquiring one well to the west in quest of Humpty Tumtoes. He said that to his daughter. You bastard, James Joyce, you son of a bitch. James Joyce is worse than Humbert, in my opinion.
Would go out and Ernest Hemingway had to fight for him all the time because he go out.
We should be scraping James Joyce from a bag. They should have put you on a jar on a mantelpiece, James Joyce.
Baba Booey.
What a bastard.
What a piece of shit.
A freaking guy, man. I'm gonna burn this book now. I hate this book.
Yeah.
Look at this. Just like the whole thing is like that.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that. Honor Commercio's energy, yet aid the linkless proud, the plurable with everybody, and Eck and Powell, this Ernst of Allsap's ale, Halliday of roaring. What the freaking?
He's trying to like McCarthy does that, but actually does it well. So he does a vernacular. He's doing a local vernacular emblematic of the modernistic spirit of culture and I don't know, man, but he's full of shit. It's just because his characters are annoying, dude. Part of the whole Ulysses is like these two guys walk by and then there's a creep. No, that's in Portrait of the Artist. There's a creep they have to deal with, and then he goes and he cheats on his wife. I don't give a shit.
Oh,
about you walking around.
He's an edgelord. He's an edgelord. He cheats on his wife. What did he write about pooping? He wrote he wrote a passage about the character pooping.
Of course.
I mean, well, McCarthy did that with Ballard, to be fair, but he wipes his ass with a stick. Yeah. But when McCarthy does it, it's not hacky because he doesn't have a girl's name, Joyce.
Yeah.
Exactly. But hey, I got a question for you, bro. Yeah. My middle name is Dana. Is that okay?
Yeah. Well, my middle name is Anita, so. I don't go around advertising that shit, man. I'm not telling anybody.
What about Dana Carvey? Do you like Dana Carvey? Is he okay?
Yeah, but Dana's kind of one of. I mean, I don't know.
Dana was a pirate's name. Is a famous.
I don't know. I'm naming my child Caligula Juanita.
I'm naming maybe my child Muscle Car.
I'm naming my child Marine Sergeant.
Maybe my child 1981 Chevy Blazer. Small, big block 383 stroke.
Dude, I had a 93 Chevy Blazer.
You have a 93? That's not a real Blazer.
I did. That was my first car. My 93 Chevy Blazer was called the White Wildebeest.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's not a real Blazer.
Smelled like a dead man. No, dude, it was badass.
It's a Grand Blazer.
No, it went decka, boom. You couldn't get the key out of the ignition, man.
I have a 82 Blazer.
Yeah.
The square bodies when
damn.
There's the proper square body. That's the real Blazer, my friend.
Yeah.
That square body, like a C10.
Yeah, you got that big ass. He's got that big ass thick body from the 80s.
Got that badonka donk.
Yeah.
Junk in the trunk.
Just like James Joyce.
Well, all right. I'm glad we can all agree that James Joyce deserves Lester Ballard's end.
Right.
Thanks for having me, dude. This was
man. Thanks for coming. All right, you guys. We'll see you next time. All right, we'll be back. All right, yo. Okay. All right. Peace.